Welcome to Colonial, back to Colonial. Wow, it seems like a long time since we were here. We never had Torah study in the terrace room. We were always up in 302. But I can tell you, we outgrew 302. It would work up there this morning. And it's just really, I think it's a marker somehow. I'm not sure what this means, but it's 312. You know, 12 is a very important governmental number. As we were worshiping, my heart turned to Psalm 34:3. You know Psalm 34:3? Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I want us to say that as a unison coming out of us, that we're all saying that to each other. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. So, we're just so grateful. You know, it's kind of a new beginning in a lot of ways, because we've never been in this room for Torah study. James and Melissa, by all rights, we would think would be in Switzerland, but they're here. We're starting a new book in the Torah. This is a time that he's calling, and we want to be sure our ears are open. And he's calling us, you know, really what he's calling, to offer ourselves to him unreservedly. So, I want to say a prayer, and then James and Melissa are going to begin. Our Father, today, we do not want to take anything for granted. We know that we're here because you created us, you redeemed us, and you appointed this time. We know this thing. And we want to thank you today for the measure we understand, and all the things you're doing that we have not comprehended yet. But Father, I pray a blessing on this time today. A blessing on James and Melissa. A blessing on your word and the going forth of it. And may you write it on our hearts. And we pray as Moses prayed. I'd like for you just to turn the palms of your hands up. Father, we pray, if we've found favor in your eyes, that you will show us your ways, that we might know you and continue to find favor in your eyes. And we ask, Father, that you would let your beauty be upon our hands. The work of our hands, establish thou it as we read your word and handle your word with our hands, and we write. Father, we present our hands to you, ourselves to you, a living sacrifice. This is what Paul is writing about. He's taken it from the book of Vayikra, that he beseeches us to offer ourselves as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto you, as our worship. We have come today to worship you in spirit and in truth, because our Savior said, this is who you're looking for. Those who would worship you in spirit and in truth. Sanctify us by truth, Father, today. Your words from your mouth are truth. And we want to eat them, and we pray that as we eat them, we will be so nourished and so filled and changed, even as we sit in your presence. In Yeshua's name we pray. And everyone said, Amen. Amen. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you for your grace and patience as we have moved to this new place, and now we have to establish all the technological things and audiovisual. And thanks to Taylor and James for it's no easy feat, I know. So I mean, I don't know actually, but I can imagine. So. This out the way. I feel like I'm too close. Yeah, I am close. It's okay. So yeah, I feel like Marilyn just summed up our portion in her prayer. It's so beautiful. But we're going to jump into just a quick overview of the book of Leviticus, as most of us know it as. As Marilyn said, in Hebrew it's Vayikra. We'll go into that a little bit more in a moment. And James, yes, thank you, Susie. Please, if you haven't silenced your cell phones, that would be greatly appreciated. Oh, and welcome to you online. We appreciate you being with us for our first time here in the parents' room together. I'm sure we look much brighter now. Okay, well, we're going to jump right into it because we have 5 chapters to cover. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read the Torah portion, but to me it's quite an intimidating one. It's huge in many respects, and so we'll see those respects here in a bit. But first we're going to just make a quick overview of the entire book of Vayikra. So basically I just want to start to say, something to keep in mind is that the entire book takes place at the foot of Mount Sinai. So the Israelites actually don't move from there until we get more into the book of Numbers. So that's just something to kind of keep in your frame of reference when you think about all these things happening. Now James, if he's ready, has a slide that's going to share a quick overview. Look, there's so many things that we can say and we can write. As you all know, it's endless, but there's some quick highlights that he has there. We might have to just use that mic.
Yeah, but they won't pick me up on the live stream, so we're going to have to, this is not going to work. I'm Memento. Yeah, Taylor, you're going to have to just disconnect this. I mean, pull it from the board because.
We're using A or B?
A. Here. Yeah, I'll just have to talk loud for the people. Okay. Can everybody hear? Do I have this one up?
Yeah. Grace, such grace. John, thank you for choosing that song. That song was so perfect for our portion.
Yes.
Wow. Absolutely. It was beautiful. I couldn't do it better myself. I was so
Oh, hi. I have arrived. I haven't used one of these mics since I played the piano.
Oh, yeah.
Good to be here. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'll go through some of the backstory of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus is going to seem hard because it calls all of us to an uncompromising, radical position of holiness. An older Hebrew name for the book was Torah Kaharim, the law of the priesthood. 8 times in Scripture, Elohim says to his people, "Be holy, for I am holy." Leviticus is a book that teaches us how to avoid sin, and how to grow in holiness because of that. The book of Leviticus is the first book studied by the Jewish children, which I'll kind of expand here in a moment because that's an amazing story. Sad that it's often among the least books of the Bible studied by most Christians, even in theological seminaries. It's a shame. Leviticus is referred to nearly 40 times in the New Covenant writings, so it should be of great significance to each one of us, because it teaches us how to walk through life in a way that we are drawn closer to the Father. Some of the key thoughts in the book of Hebrews cannot even be grasped without a clear understanding of their foundations that is only found in the book of Leviticus. So that touches us because, as you know, many congregations, they stay away from this. They pretty much live and build many sermons around the New Covenant writings, which is a shame because most of and the purpose of the letters written in the New Covenant writings is to direct you back to His Word, which is only found in the Torah and the Tanakh. Some of the key thought, the book of Leviticus teaches us our place before the Creator. Without proper understanding of this book, we cannot fully realize all that Yeshua did for us. Because if we say He fulfilled certain aspects of the feast, if you don't fully understand the feast, you can't understand His purpose. You can't understand His death and resurrection. You can't understand the final words He says, because it's found in Psalms. Father, Father, why art thou forsaken me? Psalm 22. Okay. Teaching of the protocol of the newly erected tabernacle and how to draw near. All this because we are the tabernacle. We are the temple. And if we don't fully understand the purpose of that temple, the holiness aspect of what it held inside, which is now in us, then how can we walk through each day and be that light to the world?
Amen.
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 That was good.
So I would probably sum up in the whole book of Leviticus, the theme is holiness. It's really about holiness. And to imagine that somebody just would rather rip that, I think it would be better if we just ripped out the book of Leviticus.
Yeah,
But
really?
yet we say we want to be a holy people. And so the very foundation of which holiness is built upon, we want to just get rid of. That doesn't even make any rational sense. So I'm thankful that here today we have people who are kindred spirit, and we want to dive into this book and see what our Father wants to reveal to our hearts.
Amen.
Amen. So I want to share this statement by Rabbi Russell. Rabbi Russell Resnick. He is actually a Messianic rabbi. He's from Gateways to Torah is the book. And he says this, I love it. He says, "Indeed, it is the only book," meaning Leviticus or Vayikra, of Torah that is set entirely at Mount Sinai and is in the middle of Torah, with 2 books preceding it and 2 books following. These factors, along with the emphasis on holiness, place Leviticus at the very heart of Torah. Isn't that awesome? The very heart of Torah. So James has this great slide he made. I'm going to let him explain it because he made it.
Yeah, many of you, I'm sure, have seen some form of this because I know we talk about it every year about this time. But I think we need to focus on the heart aspect of this image. The word Leviticus is, of course, is a Latin word, which is for the Levites. But it's interesting that it's made up of a Hebrew word, which is lev, which is heart. And sidebar, if any of you would like the PDF on this, I'll be more than happy to send it, because I know some of you guys are taking photos and so forth. But the key purpose of this is, if you notice the arrows, and you can kind of get into the number, I can't remember the name of it. What is it? Yeah, the gematria of the numbers. And it is important because it is very interesting how through a series of letters that they one is spelled one way, one is spelled the other, and it directs you right to this book, which Melissa's going to cover a little bit of that aspect. But the key point goes back to the heart of the matter. You cannot have a full understanding without Leviticus, because Leviticus teaches us how to live our life daily, how we are to act, what we're to do, how to make atonement for breaking of a friendship, misunderstanding people, even misunderstanding His Word. This is what gives us the guidance. And back to the children, the Jewish children who go into the synagogue, this is literally the first book that they learn. And it's because the innocence of a child can understand the sacrificial aspect of life. Meaning, when you tell a child that if you do something wrong, your dog, not in this case, your animal, the animal is going to have to be sacrificed because of your sin. They get it. They understand the importance of living right, because to think that something would have to be killed because of something they did. And the kids get it. They understand it. And their life begins to be changed. And because of that change, they're able to accept the rest of the Torah. Because they begin to understand the purpose of it. They begin to understand the sin aspect of it all. And so this is very huge to grasp Leviticus. It is, you're right. I remember when I was teaching the youth to go into Leviticus, I mean, my gosh, I'd lose half the kids. We didn't even have cell phones back then. And I would lose them. Their mind, they just get this gloss over. Because we don't fully understand it. I didn't know how to articulate it to the kids, how important this was. And now I've learned. So, back to
Learning.
learning.
I say learning. We're learning.
Absolutely.
So I've been studying this diagram. So what it's saying is that every 50 letters we see Torah?
Correct. If you begin in Bereshit and Shemot, every 50 letter from left to right spells Torah, which is absolutely amazing. And then if you go to Midbar and Devarim, every 50th letter in Midbar spells Torah, but it goes the other way. It's spelled backwards in our English transliteration. And then every 49 letters, it does the same thing in Devarim. And it's interesting about the number 49 in Devarim, which I won't cover because she's informed me that I talk too much. So, but it all points back to the heart of the matter. The Torah points back, because this is not what you find in Leviticus. So, I'll make a transition, and we'll stop there. Yes?
Actually, if you do every 49 letters or whatever in Leviticus, it spells Jehovah.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually are going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Talk about that, but
so we realize that holiness is really the theme of this book, then kind of we see the problem for the people. Because it's about how do you approach this holy Elohim, How do you approach him? Because we are all, from Adam forward, have a nature of sin. So it's, how do we approach this holy Elohim? And so this is why this opening segment is so awesome, because he's teaching us his protocol of how to approach him, how to draw near to him. And it's because we know our Father is zealous for his people. And he's zealous. He deeply desires to draw his people near and to reestablish. It's all about restoration. To reestablish what was lost in the garden, to have perfect communion. So even the very name in Hebrew gives us a profound insight into our Father's heart. In Vayikra, it means, and he called. Marilyn prayed that, I said that earlier. And he called. Well, what's in a name anyway? I think it's very important. I wish I had children. I do not have children. However, if I did, I've always thought about what would I name them? Because it's so important what we name our children, even if I have a pet. The name is something that means something, not just fluffy or something like that. So what's a good name? Well, our Father, he thinks a lot about these things. As we know all through Scripture, I mean, every name has such purpose. It's so fascinating. Yeshua. Perfect example, salvation. So what you call something depends on how you approach it. So we already said this, but traditionally this book is called Leviticus, which then presents the idea that this book is focused towards the Levites. And with that is why I think most of the churches ignore this book, because it's focused towards the Levites. Well, there's no temple, and You know, Yeshua took care of all that, so we don't even need to pay attention to it. It's an old system, so we can ignore it. But if we dive into the Hebrew name of this book, we get a whole new perspective. I love the Hebrew language. It's my heart's desire to really grab hold of the Hebrew language because we learn so much more from our Father's Word when we know His language, the language of His Word. So Vayikra, and He called. It is the Father who is calling us to draw near to Him. This is what He's establishing. I love you, and I want you to draw near to me, but because I'm holy, I have to create a system in which you can draw near. He wants us to draw near to His presence. He's calling us to be a holy and set-apart people. Amen? And so He wants to teach us what is holy and what is pure. And so that's really, we're going to unlock these things as we go on this journey together in this book. So, something I found really interesting diving into the Hebrew. Most normally when you see Yah addressing Moses, we see two different Hebrew verbs, amar or davar, which basically means to speak, to speak. So, for example, Vayomer Adonai, meaning and Adonai spoke. But here we see the root verb of Vayikra, which is the word kara, which means to call. I had Biblical Hebrew this week with Steve, and we learned this word actually this week, and she taught it to us, kara, kara. So literally that's what he called. And what's so cool is that we only see 4 times in the story of Moses where he used this phrase. And I want to share them with you because it's pretty profound. It tells us where we're going. So the first place we see is in Exodus 3:4, which is the burning bush. That's where he first called. The second place where he called comes on Mount Sinai when Yah calls Moses and Israel to be his treasured possession. And then they receive he gives Moses the 10 Commandments. That's Exodus 19. And then in Exodus 24, Moses is called up for 40 days, 40 nights. And part of that is when he received the blueprints for the tabernacle. So that tells us, and then finally here, which here, where we're at today, Vayikra, is actually a continuation of the Exodus story. And so I have to say, it's that our Father has laid a pattern for us to see. He wants us to follow the breadcrumbs, so to speak, to realize that this is very important. The things He's going to tell us in this book are very important for us. For us, the redeemed. It's very important for us. So like I said, really Vayikra is a continuation of the Exodus story. And the reason I say that is really based off the name of the book. Because the first letter in Hebrew of the name of this book is a vav. And for those that don't know, a vav is a connecting letter. Most generally it means and. So that's why we know the book's name and the parashah's name is based off that first sentence in the parashah, and he called. So he's connecting it to what was previously done and said. In Exodus, we saw the ending, it ended with a tent of appointment in the place that it was erected and established, and everything according to the instructions given to Moses on the mount. Yah was pleased, and we know that His glory of His presence filled the tabernacle. Even Moshe could not stand in His presence, right? And this is a man that was on Mount Sinai, and the fire and the thunderings, and he could not stand in that place. That is amazing. But our Father wanted him to draw near, and He wanted His people to draw near. So He called across this great divide between Him and man, and He instituted this new system of korbanot. That's the word in Hebrew, korbanot, and it means offerings. And so I just believe in that moment when his presence fell in that tabernacle, it was like there was this greater reality of his presence. I mean, he came near. And so the reality of his presence was greater. There was a greater, not that Yah can be any more holy than he already is, but for the people, it's always from, really, everything about him is the same. He changes not, right? He's the same yesterday and forever. But from our perspective, it seems to be always changing, but it's not. But for them, it was like, whoa, he took holiness to a whole new level. And so, at that point, the people could have been like, okay, cool. God's presence with us. We can just go about our thing, be merry, drink, and be happy, and dance, and da-da-da-da, which they kind of did. But this is what many believers do today. This is what many of us do today. We kind of overlook how holy he is, how reverent he is. And I mean, I never want to condemn, although I just wonder if that's one reason we've lost his presence in the ecclesia in many ways. I mean, there's pockets, of course, but in general, over the broad scope, because there's such a lack of reverence for his holiness, and we don't conduct ourselves in a reverential way, his presence can't dwell amongst us. And so we see that this was really the beginning of things, the beginning of the journey to the promised land. And we know that everything that is written in the Torah is a type and shadow for our lives. And so as we journey to the kingdom, we better take good notes and pay attention to what he's saying to us.
Amen.
Amen. So also this book in this Bob, and it actually, I believe the book of Vayikra profoundly foreshadows Messiah more than any other book. Because he is the Bob. Yeshua is the Bob. He's the connector of heaven to earth. He really, as we'll see, is a fulfillment of all these offerings, because he connects heaven to earth. And that's what those offerings are about, connecting heaven to earth.
Amen.
Okay, so in agreement with what James and I did during our last parasha, we read the Bris Kadashah first, and then we read the Haftarah, and then we weaved them into the bigger scope of our Torah portion. And so we want to take that same pattern today. So, if you will please open up with us to Matthew 5, starting in verse 23, and we'll go through verse 30. Well, I'm thinking Mike because he's right here in front of us. If you will read that for us, that would be wonderful.
5:23 through 30. Matthew 5, 23 through 30. Thank you.
If therefore you would present your gift at the altar, and there you would remember that your brother has something against you, you must right away leave your gift there in front of the altar and go. You must first become reconciled with your brother, and then after you come back, present your gift. You must quickly be of a peaceable spirit with your opponent at law, even while you are with him on the way, lest the opponent would hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the jailer, and you would be cast into prison. Truly I say to you, you would not come out from there until you would have given your last penny.
To 30.
You heard that it was said, you will not commit adultery. But I am saying to you that everyone who looks at a woman with desire for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And if your right eye causes you to sin, you must tear it out at once and cast it from you. For it's more profitable for you that one of your members would be lost and that your whole body would not be cast into Gehenna. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you, for it is more profitable for you that one of your members would be lost, but your whole body would not go over into Gehenna.
Amen.
Then we're going to be in Isaiah 43, starting in verse 21, reading through Isaiah 44, verse 23, and I'm going to ask Jean if she could read that for us.
She has a great voice.
You said Isaiah 43 to what?
43, 21 to 44, 23.
21.
43, 21.
Okay.
44. I have it up on the board if you guys. Just in case. Thinking of you guys.
I fashioned this people for myself, that it might declare my praise. But you did not call to me, O Jacob, for you grew weary of me, O Israel. You did not bring me sheep for your olaf offerings, nor did you honor me with your peace offerings. I did not burden you with a meal offering, nor did I weary you with frankincense. You bought me no cinnamon with silver, nor did you satisfy me with the fat of your offering. But you burdened me with your sins. You wearied me with your iniquities. I, only I, am the one who wipes away your willful sins for my sake, and I shall not recall your sins. Remind me, let us contest one another. Tell your side first, that you may be vindicated. Your first patriarch erred, and your advocates betrayed me. So I have profaned the holy princes. I handed Jacob to devastation, and Israel to rebukes. And now listen, Jacob, my servant, and Israel, who I fashioned from the womb. He will help you. Fear not. My servant Jacob and Jeshurun, whom I have chosen, just a thirsty land and streams upon the dry ground. So shall I pour my spirit upon your offspring, and my blessing upon your children. They will flourish among the grass like willows by streams of water. This one will say, I am Hashem's, and the other one will call in the name of Jacob. One will sign his allegiance to Hashem, and the other will adopt the name Israel. Hang on, my pages are stuck. So said Hashem, King of Israel and its Redeemer, Hashem, Master of legions. I am the first and I am the last, and aside from me there is no God. Who can declare that he, like me, can proclaim and order events, since I am placed the people of antiquity? And let them tell us miracles that will yet come. Be not afraid and be not terrified. Did I not let you hear and tell you of yore? And you are my witnesses. Is there a God beside me? There is no rock I do not know. All who fashion statues are empty, and their treasures will not avail. They bear witness on themselves, for they see not and know not. Let their worshippers be shamed. Who would fashion a god or a molten statue that has no purpose? Behold, all who join it will be shamed, and the artisans, they are but human. Let them all gather and stand. They shall be frightened and shamed together. The ironsmith makes his tool and works with charcoal, and fashions an idol with hammers. He crafts it with all his strength, though he may be hungry and without strength. He drinks no water and grows faint. The woodworker stretches a line and marks his shape with a chalk. He works on an idol with planes and marks it with a compass. He makes it like a human form, like human splendor, only to be deposited in a house. He cuts himself cedar trees He takes shade trees and oak trees and strengthens them with trees of the forest. He plants a fir tree, and the rain makes it grow. It will be fuel for man. He will take some of them and warm himself, and even make a fire and bake bread. And he will even make of it a god and prostrate himself. He will make a graven image and worship it. He burns half of it in the fire. With half he prepares meat to eat, roasting it and sating himself. He will even warm himself and say, "Ah, I have warmed myself. I enjoy the fire." And with the rest he makes a god as his graven image. He will bow to it, prostrate himself, and pray to it. He will say, "Save me, for you are my God." They do not know, they do not understand. A coating prevents their eyes from seeing and their hearts from comprehending. He does not rebuke his heart. There is no wisdom or insight to say, "I burned half of it in the fire, and I baked bread on its coals. I roasted meat and ate it. Could I make an abomination of the rest? Could I bow to the branch of a tree? His shepherd is but ashes. His mocking heart deceived him. He cannot even save himself. Yet he does not say, 'There is falsehood in my right hand.' Remember this, O Jacob and Israel, for you are my servant. I fashioned you to be my servant. O Israel, do not forget me. I have wiped away your willful sins like a cloud, and your errors like a wisp. Return to me, for I have redeemed you. Sing glad song, O heaven, for what Hashem has done. Call out, O core of the earth. Break out, O mountains, in glad song. O forest and every tree within it. For Hashem will have redeemed Jacob, and he will glorify himself in Israel."
Wow. Wow. That's amazing.
That really sets the tone.
Yeah.
You know, I asked Melissa if I could share on this one. You know, she shared. And it's this particular haftar really got me, because it just shows just how foolish mankind can be. You burn it on one end and you worship it on the other. It says it all. But there's something that really caught my attention, and it's in verse 26. Your first father has sinned. It's interesting because I didn't quite understand fully what that meant, and then also in 27 as well. I find it interesting because some of the translations have your first fathers, or the fathers of your first, which, you know, we're believing it's the patriarchs and so forth, but it's not. When I started really searching deep into this, I found out that it means a little bit different. In verse 27 it says, I'm kind of curious, how many has something different other than your first father? Because I believe only the translations that came from the Hebrew to English actually says your first fathers. Many of them say your first fathers, it's plural. How many has a plural? Most of us probably are using the Hebrew Bibles. Ancestors, right.
Patriarchs.
Yeah, so yours has patriarchs. And I find it quite interesting because in reality, in the Hebrew, it's a singular word, which is avakah, which is your father. It says in 27, your first father, avakah, has sinned, and your teachers have transgressed against me. And I'll talk about the teachers here in a minute. Many English Bibles will have your forefathers, or like she said, your patriarchs, your first fathers. In Hebrew, it doesn't say your forefathers or anything else. It says your first fathers. It's very definitive. It's avakah in Hebrew. Your fathers would be avatakah. See, it's good to have someone who understands the Hebrew language. Your fathers, it would be plural. Here, it's only one father. So who is the father that sinned? Is it Jacob? Is it Abraham? It's interesting because one thing that you'll find out, it's always about the garden. You'll find 90% of everything that happened at the garden and began there, and everything thereafter is a correction. Your first father, let's take a look at Adam. In the Tanakh, each person is responsible for his own actions. That's the Tanakh concept. But there's no question that all mankind suffered from the sin of Adam. And why is that? Because Adam was commanded, do not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. See, that's where it begins. It goes back, the whole purpose of the sacrifices, it goes back to why we teach the children. He chose to violate Elohim's commandment. And that is a picture. That's a picture of the Torah, which is, through the living Torah, which we know is Yeshua, we have this opportunity to once again, to eat from the tree of life and live forever, spiritually. In Proverbs 3:18 it says, it is a tree of life to those who lay hold on it, and happy to everyone who retains it. What's he talking about? He's talking about his Torah. So here's an example where we have this idea in Genesis, and then spoken or explained in Proverbs, that the Torah itself is the tree of life. In Deuteronomy 30:15-20 it talks about, I place before you the choice. See, he always gives us a choice. We're a free will being, but we're a spirit being. We're meant to be drawn to his presence. And to do otherwise is contrary. And this is how we come into sin, a thought to do something other than what is right. I place before you the choice between life and death, good and evil. Choose life so both you and your descendants may live. This is a generational thing. It's just not about you. It's about everyone around you, your family, the family that you touch. Adam sinned, and therefore all have sinned. I can't just go eat from the tree, but in and through Torah, now I have a second chance. My second chance is by eating from the tree of life, which we know from John is Yeshua. And if we can grab and understand this concept, our life becomes a lot easier because we start lining ourselves with truth. It's interesting. One of the other things he comes against the interpreter. He comes against those who are bringing the Torah, because many people, the only time and way that they could get to the Torah was through the Pharisees, the ones who would present it out. Most people didn't have access, the teachers. It says, your first father, Avakah, has sinned, and I can't pronounce that, she can try if she wants, your teachers have transgressed against me. Teachers is melez. What? Yeah, she tried to tell me that earlier. In Hebrew is the interpreter. And it's interesting because where is the first place that we find this? The first place we find this word is in Genesis. Come on now. Genesis 42. It talks about when Joseph's brother were standing before Joseph, who is the vicar of Egypt. They didn't realize that, of course, that it was Joseph. They think it's an Egyptian. He dresses like an Egyptian. He looks like and he's speaking like an Egyptian. So they began talking amongst themselves in Hebrew. And it says, and they did not know that Joseph heard, literally, or understood. Before the interpreter was between them, the interpreter was to interpret. In other words, the brother would speak in Hebrew and the interpreter would translate that into Egyptian. So back in Isaiah, it says, your interpreters have transgressed against me. Our Father wants to talk to us directly without the interpreter. So I just want to leave you with this thought. It's important that the Spirit that draws, that is in us, gives us the wisdom and understanding of His Word. And with that word should bring change. It should bring, we should have an outward expression of who we are by the word, through the Spirit in us, and our light should be different than those around us, other than when we fellowship. But we are to bring the light to those. We don't need an interpreter. This is the purpose of the Holy Spirit. I'm going to send one, he says. I must go so the other can come. Right? And that Spirit that dwells us gives us revelation. But if we don't read it ourselves, then the interpretation is lost because the Spirit can't move. Back to you, Maya.
Good.
Amen. That is good.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think of the times we're in. I mean, more and more we're going to see we've seen, but we're going to see more and more false teachers, false prophets arise. And so I just agree, we need this so implanted in our hearts, in our spirits, so that we're not deceived, that we don't listen to the wrong interpretation. Amen? Okay, so I'm just going to give a quick intro to today's parashah from my perspective. I'll just be honest, I wanted to take us every which way in this parashah because it is so awesome.
Tell them how many pages you have on it.
Too many.
8, 9.
But I would love to have taken us deeper. I would love to take us into the book of Hebrews and really just flush a lot of misinterpretations out of that book. That book is so misinterpreted. I would have loved to take us down the journey of the Melchizedek priesthood. I mean, it's too much. But I will stick to the script, which is the Torah portion. So we'll be looking at 5 very significant offerings, right? We've already said the word for offerings is korban, and the root in this word korban is the word karav. And karav in Hebrew means to draw near. So, right there, we see the very heart of our Father in these offerings. Shirley?
One more thing in that word, you see the bait and you see the noon. Ben means see a sign. The sign who draws us near.
Amen. So in the word korban, Shirley pointed out, there is the bet and the noon, which bring those 2 letters together, and you get the word ben, which is sun. So we see I love that. You see the sun in the korban, the son of Elohim, ben Elohim. I'd like to do a whole teaching on ben Elohim. The name, ben Elohim. Okay, so many have seen the sacrificial system as a negative impairing to the drawing near of Yah and man, but we will see it was his mercy, his loving kindness, and of course the foreshadowing of the ben Elohim. He will never lessen the impact of his holiness, but he will always move mountains and build bridges for us to draw near to him. Amen? I mean, he moved the mountain when he brought his son. So, and I also believe there's this interesting parallel between the tabernacle. When we talk about, over the last few weeks, we're bringing these parallels between the tabernacle and the garden, the tabernacle and Mount Sinai. Well, I stumbled on another parallel that I like to share. We can look at the Holy of Holies as heaven, right? That's where his presence dwells. And we can look at the outer court as the earth. It's where we dwell. And we dwell in sin, right? I mean, we dwell with sin. So where was the brazen altar? It was in the outer court. Because he's giving us this time to really navigate this journey with him and to fully surrender to Ben Elohim, to the Son, so that we can dwell with him for eternity in the Holy of Holies. And so I just think that's such a beautiful parallel again, where he wants us to be fully in his presence. Now, when we come into these offerings, you know, we could come with a very, I'm like, everybody's staring at something. We could come at it with a very theological viewpoint, or even from a very practical place. That's just not really my way. I really would like us to come, approach these offerings from the place of sonship, from the place of daughtership, from the place of really intimacy, and through it gain a new understanding. I pray that as we study his word together in this, that it will be transformational in our own lives, that we'll leave here with a newer understanding of our identity. And because I believe that's what he was doing for Israel. He was calling them into a new identity. He was removing that old mindset of Egypt and bringing them into this new understanding, this new identity of being his sons, his daughters, his nation, his people, his treasured possession. So that's kind of the mind frame I like, or the heart frame I like us to go into this with. So it would appear that with these 5 offerings, that the main focus is the offerings, right? It would appear that way. But in actuality, the focus is us. The focus were the people, the individuals. Because we'll see in this that the individuals had to bring the offerings. They had to slay the offerings, right? So it's about the individual, the one bringing the offering. And this really connects to our Vayikra passage in Matthew 5. Because in Matthew 5, Yeshua instructs that when you bring an offering and you remember that your heart isn't right with your brother, you are to leave your offering and go make it right. It's about the individual. It's about the heart. The heart of the matter is we should. And so that's really what he's getting at. And actually when Mike was reading that, I was getting some more revelation on that scripture I've never seen before. Hopefully I can share it later.
We're going to tell 4 today.
Oh, good, yeah, we might be. And he said all the Torah and the prophet hang on those 2 commandments, to love him and to love one another. So again, we see it's that heart condition, and that every offering really is an extension of his heart for us. And so again, this new system was really a system of grace, make his people right with him. They were all free will offerings. They were all volunteer offerings, because like James said, we are people of free will. And so he wants us to come to him in that free will, in that heart and attitude of genuine worship and humility. It's really the essential to it all, because, you know, they could have offered these offerings just out of rote, like, okay, God said it, we'll do it, and they just do it. If there's no conviction in the heart for what they're doing, then he really rejects them, like we just saw in Isaiah. He rejected because they were bringing it, not that they were actually defiling it in many ways. But Mark 12:33 says, to love him, Elohim, with all the heart, with all understanding, and with all strength, and to love the neighbor, your neighbor as oneself, is much more than all burnt offerings and sacrifices.
Amen.
I'm trying to rush through these because I have a lot of notes and I realize I don't want to read them all.
Really?
Yeah. So we know that if we approach Elohim, I want to share an example here. If we approach Elohim with a sincere attitude of worship, and we heed to his prescribed method for offerings, the person will be accepted. So let's look back in Genesis. We see the account of Cain, right? Cain and Abel. And Cain offers Adonai an offering, but he didn't offer it in the right attitude. And what did Adonai do? He rejected it. and it caused anger. I mean, we could learn a whole lot from that story, and we'll pick up that story a little bit as we go into some of these offerings. The phrase, if you do well, will you not be accepted? That's what Adonai said to Cain. Along with Cain's response of anger in killing his brother, reveals that Cain was not primarily interested in worshiping the Lord, even though he had presented an offering. So he did it by rote because it was asked of him, but his heart was totally removed from what he was doing. There wasn't this synergy between his heart and the offering. And so even we know that, even when we give our tithes and offerings, that he wants us to give them out of a cheerful heart, right? Mm-hmm. Not out of a heart of, I gotta do this because he said, and he doesn't want that. I think he would rather we don't give it at all. That that's the heart we're going to give it in.
And I think that's the example when he asks for the material to build the tabernacle. Let your heart, if your heart wants, give.
And it's the same with the Isaiah portion we just read. The Jews of the time, they were just going through the motions, but their heart was so removed. Okay, I'm moving along here. I'm sorry, like I said, I have a lot to say, but I think I'm going to just jump into our Torah portion. Yeah. So again, I just want us to take these 5 chapters and really apply them to our hearts today, our lives today. Because knowledge, if we just come to gain knowledge of Torah, but we don't apply it to our lives, it's empty. There's no purpose in it, And knowledge puffs up. So we don't want to be a puffed up people. We want to be a surrendered people. And so it's really an opportunity to surrender our hearts just to hear what he has to say. Because this whole Torah portion from Matthew, Isaiah to Vayikra, it's all about redemption.
Amen.
Okay, I am honestly moving forward. And I will be going a lot into the Hebrew words because I think unless we have the Hebrew words, we miss a lot of the concepts. We miss a lot of the depth of what he wants to share with us, just from seeing it from an English, almost what I would say superficial place. The Hebrew takes us to a depth. So I will be going into a lot of that. And I also want to lay this out for you, okay? I feel like, I almost wonder, if the rabbis accepted Isaiah 53 as a chapter pointing to Messiah, that would be the Haftarah for this portion, or a potential Haftarah for this portion, because Isaiah 53, we all know, it's very familiar. I think we all love this portion, this piece, this chapter. But the whole of the offerings are encapsulated in Isaiah 53. So I just want to read it real briefly for us, just to lay that foundation. Who has believed our report? To whom is the arm of Adonai revealed? For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form of majesty that we should look at him, nor beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, one from whom people hide their face. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our pains, yet we esteemed him struck by Elohim and afflicted. But he was pierced because of our transgressions, crushed because of our iniquities. The chastisement or the punishment for our shalom was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us turned to his own way. So Adonai has laid on him the iniquity of us all. It's right there. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, like a sheep before its shears is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Because of oppression and judgment, he was taken away. As for his generation, who considered? For he was cut off from the land of the living, or the transgression of my people. The stroke was theirs. His grave was given with the wicked and by a rich man in his death. Though he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth, yet it pleased Adonai to bruise him. He caused him to suffer. If he makes his soul a guilt offering, he will see his offspring. He will prolong his days, and the will of Adonai will succeed by his hand. Wow. As a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see it and be satisfied by his knowledge. The righteous one, my servant, will make many righteous, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion with the great, and he will divide the spoil with the mighty, because he poured out his soul to death, and was counted with transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and interceded for the transgressors. It says it all. Everything we're going to talk about.
Close shot. Thank you for coming.
And of course, we're not going to cover every detail because the next part, John, we're going to talk about them again. And John's going to lead us in that. So, all right, I just want to say the blessing of the Torah, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher b'char banu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our Elohim, ruler of the universe, who has chosen us from among all the nations and given us the Torah. Gratitude. Blessed are you, Adonai, provider of the Torah. So here we are, chapter 1.
Wow. Mighty God.
So, we're just going to read chapter 1. Jimmy's going to hand out a little handout. And Brian, could you read for us? Okay, no.
No, well, I'm going to have
John, could you read for us? Oh, John.
I'm going to have Sean do it. And then Brian, because I like Brian, can be heard very good.
Brian,
Can you just hand one out?
read for us chapter 1?
There's over 40 here, so if you're a married couple, maybe take one, and if there's an extra, then we'll disperse them. What do you think? I think there's 42 people here today.
Yes, there's 42, I counted.
Yeah. I think there's 42, so
Okay.
maybe the couples can take one for right now. Thank you, Brian.
And Adonai called to Moses and spoke to him out of the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, if any man of you brings an offering to Adonai, you will bring your offering of the cattle, of the herd, and of the flock. If his offering is a burnt offering of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He will offer it of his own voluntary will at the door of the tent of meeting before Adonai. And he will put his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted for him to make atonement for him. And he will kill the bull before Adonai. The priests, Aaron's sons, will bring the blood and sprinkle the blood all around the altar that is by the door of the tent of meeting. And he will flay the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. And the sons of Aaron the priest will put fire upon the altar and lay the wood in order on the fire. And the priests, Aaron's sons, will lay the parts, the head and the fat, in order upon the wood that is on the fire, which is on the altar. But its innards and its legs will be washed in water, and the priest will burn all on the altar, a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor to Adonai. And if his offering is from the flocks, of the sheep or of the goats, for a burnt offering he will bring a male without blemish, and he will kill it on the north side of the altar before Adonai. And the priest, Aaron's son, will sprinkle its blood all around upon the altar. And he will cut it into pieces with its head and its fat. And the priest will lay them in order on the wood that is on the fire which is upon the altar. But he will wash the innards and the legs with water. And the priest will bring it all and burn it upon the altar. It is a burnt offering, an an offering made by fire of a sweet savor to Adonai. And if the burnt offering for his offering to Adonai is a fowl, then he will bring his offering of turtle doves or of young pigeons. And the priest will bring it to the altar and wring off its head and burn it on the altar. And its blood will be drawn out at the side of the altar. And he will pluck up its crop, and its feathers and cast it beside the altar on the east part, by the place of the ashes. And he will split it with its wings, not dividing it in parts. And the priest will burn it upon the altar, upon the wood that is on the fire. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet savor to Adonai.
Amen.
Thank you, Brian.
Isn't this a beautiful slide? James made this whole thing. He put it all together. I just love that. Yeah.
Thank you. 6 weeks in the making. Me and Marilyn are very similar in our
They are.
I want the column to be just right. I want it to be spelled correctly.
Sandy, don't look at the spelling or the editing. I didn't check it. So.
I am public school, so my spelling could be.
No, he's brilliant in so many ways. English just isn't his forte.
I speak it, but don't write it.
I want to take us to the first line of this opening chapter, because it has some treasures in it. And so James has it up on the screen for us in Hebrew. And the first thing I want to point out is that the word of Vayikra, which is the first thing you see there. Do you want to point to the little olive?
Oh,
Vanna.
this has a special little.
Oh, that's cool.
Are you referring to this letter here?
No, the purple one.
The purple?
Yeah. Oh. The color coded. This is so amazing. So, this is how we see this in Hebrew in the Torah scrolls. This olive, which is like an A in Hebrew, is made smaller than the rest of the letters of Vayikra. Why is that? It's because the olive actually, and I know that my Hebrew scholars in the room could probably say a lot more than I'm going to say right now, is really a letter has a picture of strength, of even independence. It means, the pictorial, back when Hebrew was a pictorial language, it was that of an ox. And interesting is Yeshua is known as like the ox. But anyway, but we see here that the olive has taken the position of humility. That he's gone low. He's surrendered his strength. He's surrendered his independence. And he goes low. And so I just wanted to share that because really I believe that is how we will receive revelation from this book. When we go low. Amen. When we just check our knowledge, our understanding, our mindsets at the door, and we just say, okay, Ruach, Holy Spirit, do what you want in my heart. And we just bow before him and we surrender. And so we take the position of the olive. Isn't that great? And then in that first slide James showed with the heart, underneath it had talked about how starting with the first yod of that, of down here.
Yeah, I'll get it.
Or down here it talks about it. Starting with the first yod, if you count every 7 letters, it spells out the Tetragrammaton, the infallible name of our Father. So let's go back to that slide. So the spells out the Yud Hey Vav Hey. And so we start with the first yod, count 7 over, we have Hey, 7 over Vav, 7 over, we have Hey. And so isn't that awesome? So in this first opening sentence, we see the Father and we see the Son. It's so awesome. And he's calling us to draw near by taking a position of humility.
Amen.
Right right there. I mean, we could just stop and sail on that.
Hades raised hand.
What's that?
Raised arms. Raised arms.
What's that?
Hey.
Hey?
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Like our Father.
Yeah, amen. Okay, I just want to take a minute. Father, we just thank you for the opportunity to enter into this beautiful book of yours. And I do ask that you would help each of us just to bow our hearts before you, to take that position of humility and surrendering our own thoughts and ways, and surrendering to your thoughts and ways. I ask that you would give us ears to hear what you want to say to us today, in Yeshua's name, and that you would help James and I just to articulate your heart.
Amen.
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 So what we're looking at here in this beginning offering is what many know as a burnt offering. However, I think we're kind of running short on time. Can I just put it? Well, you can show it on the Torah dialogue.
We're watching the time.
So he's going to put up the chart that you have in your hand, but you can just reference those as we go through each one.
The explanation of the graph versus the handout that we gave you is the English translation and the word that they chose for each of the offerings. Although when you really get into the actual description of what's taking place of the offerings, they're a little bit different. And this is the handout that we gave you. It's the explanation of the true meaning of each offering and the purpose of that offering. Because sometimes burnt offering is misleading, or meat offering, because it doesn't necessarily always mean meat. So, anyway, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So the Hebrew word for this burnt offering is actually means like to ascend, or also can mean to approach. And so now we see what our Father's getting at with this first offering. And I just want to share this. Olah, which means to ascend, the Olah offering ascended up in smoke, right? Well, the Britannica actually says the word Holocaust is derived from the Greek holocauston, I'm not a Greek scholar, a translation of the Hebrew word Olah, meaning a burnt sacrifice offered whole to Elohim. Oh, makes me want to cry. This word was chosen and gained wide usage because in the ultimate manifestation of the Nazi killing program, the extermination camps, the bodies of the victims were consumed whole in crematoria or open fires. I didn't know that until I started studying this. Maybe some of you knew that. I didn't know that.
Could you repeat that?
The word Olah, the name Holocaust comes from this Hebrew word, this idea, this Hebrew word Olah, to ascend, the smoke to ascend, and it's from the Greek word holocauston. I can't really see that very well, but anyway, so you can see that parallel. So like James was saying, burnt offering or burnt sacrifice, which is how this offering is known in most English translation, is actually very misleading because it implies that this offering was the only offering burnt as opposed to the other offerings on the altar. But we know that's not true. So not only were the items presented for this offering burned, but so was the case for each of the sacrificial offerings. The altar was involved with each of them, and when the altar is involved, burning is involved. So again, rather than calling it burnt, we will look at this offering as an approach offering. A lot of the Hebrew translations, like the Shulchan Bible, says a near offering, because the whole idea is he wants to draw us to draw near to him, and so, or to come up, because it's an ascension offering, so to come up. which is interesting when you think of that. I thought of, I think it's Revelations 4 or something, and Yah is calling to John and he says, come up here, you know, he's calling to come up to the door, you know, and to hear these marvelous things he wants to say. And that's kind of what he's saying to Israel, come up here, come to the door of the tabernacle, I've got things to share with you, come near. You know, we get to enter into the Holy of Holies, the throne of mercy by the blood of Yeshua. He says, come up, hear what I have to say. And so, you know, we need to make actually a tabernacle in our own lives, and a appointed place for our own lives, where every day we come up near to Him and we listen. What are you saying, Father?
Amen.
So again, like I said earlier, the individual was the one that brings the offering. He was the offerer, and he was also the one that killed the animal. So now with all that, let's talk about Yeshua. The reality of Yeshua, I want to talk about who killed Yeshua, because this is something that's often talked about. And I want to say we all killed Yeshua, right? Although he laid down his life willingly, we all partook in that. And in the natural, when you actually, you know, the Jewish people are actually accused of killing Yeshua. But let's just look at the facts. In the natural, it was the Jews and the Gentiles that killed Yeshua. So he comes to redeem all. Because we all took part in it. Now again, I don't want to go through all the specifics. Maybe James will more so. I'm not sure. We didn't really talk a lot about this. But we know the offering had to be from the livestock, a bull or a sheep, a male, no blemish. And we see this also reflected in Yeshua. He was a male, and he was known as the Lamb of Elohim, and he was without blemish. Amen? Mm-hmm. And this was actually the most common of all the offerings. We see this offering again and again and again. And you know, the greatest part about presenting the Torah is that you get to be the one that really studies it out and digs deep, and you find things you never saw before. At least I never saw before. And so the burnt offerings can be found throughout Scripture even before the Mosaic Covenant. So we see back in Noah in Genesis 8:20, and he offered a burnt offering to Elohim. And then we see, or I should say an Olah offering, and then we see with Abraham in Genesis 22:13, one of Maryland's most favorite places to camp at, is the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Isaac was to be an Olah offering. But our Father gave substitution.
Thank you.
And what?
That's right.
Which is, okay. So we also see in Moses, with Moses in Exodus 10:25. And then again, I want to share just this quick verse from Exodus 18:2. This is with Yethro, Moses' father-in-law. Did you guys know he offered an Olah offering? It says Yethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to Elohim. And Aaron came with all the leaders of Israel to share the meal before Elohim with Moshe's father-in-law.
Scott, you want to share?
Please do.
We're saying Yethro was the first convert, for lack of a better term, from a Midian priest to following Yah.
That's correct.
And that was all without that offering.
That's right.
That was the proof behind the pudding.
That's solidified.
That's very good.
And he got a partial named it.
He did. And he will always.
Gentile I know.
That's right.
Yeah, amen. Well, I'm just hitting that real fast. So a person could give an Olah offering at any time. Again, it was a free will offering, a volunteer offering, which we see in verse 3. But it came with specific stipulations, as all of these did. It was a sacrifice of general atonement or covering. an acknowledgement of the sin nature. We all have a sin nature, right? So this was an acknowledgement of the sin nature and a request for a renewed relationship with Yah. Yah also set times for the priest to give all offerings and for the benefit of all of the Israelites as a whole. Although sometimes, the sacrifices varied depending, I think we'll get into a little bit more. We see that he gives, based on a person's social class, he gives different stipulations for different sacrifices, which is such grace on his part that he doesn't, he's no respecter of man, right? And so he's like, I want you all to draw near to me. So I'm going to make the way for everybody to participate in this. And so this near offering or Ola offering was actually a part of the everyday life of Israel.
Every day.
We see this offering given in Exodus 29. It talks about how this offering was given every morning and every evening. It says a regular Ola offering throughout your generations at the entrance of the tent of meeting before Adonai, where I will meet with you to speak to you there.
Amen. Wow.
So already we see we need to incorporate an Ola offering into our daily life. Yeshua actually was the Ola offering. I mean, we're going to talk about that more, but when you think about it, he was. It talks about in Matthew, is it? That he was, when he was put on the cross, it was the morning offering. It was at that time of the morning offering, which I believe is like 9 a.m. And then he died at the time of the evening offering, which was around 3 p.m.
Oh, that's amazing. We need to
yeah.
That's good. Wow.
I think Luke tells us too that Miriam and Joseph, they gave 2 doves in the offering because of their son being
Exactly.
born to them.
Because, and it showed that they were poor, actually.
Yeah.
Because they all have offering. Yeah. Exactly, Cheryl, that's good.
But I think it's interesting too then, because don't we think of the Holy Spirit as a dove too?
Yeah.
I mean, he could have chosen many other birds, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. This Ola offering, yes, team.
Just with what you're talking about, where does the tithe that we often hear when we go to churches, right? Bring your tithe before the Lord. So where would this fit, and does it fit?
It's a good question, Jean. She asked about the tithe. Where does it fit in these offerings? I would say it fits in the next offering that we're going to go to, which is the Minka offering. Yep. So we'll get to that hopefully. So it's also this Ola offering is offered each Shabbat, the beginning of each month, Rosh Chodesh, at Passover, with the new grain, first fruits, weeks, the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah, and after fulfilling a vow. Which is quite interesting. And it was a general knowledge of Elohim's holiness and authority and man's weakness and sinful nature in comparison, in contrast, The deeper sense of this Hebrew word, olah, is that Yah breaks open the way for sinful man to come near to him. Again, we love him because he first loved us. This offering did not take away sin, but it sought atonement, allowing for this closer fellowship with Elohim. And so, really, we're going to see this more as we go. This Ola offering had to really be offered before any other offering. The other ones couldn't be offered until this one was offered. Right. And it goes hand in hand often with the Minka offering, which I'm probably going to repeat myself because I just going ahead of myself. So the Ola offering, in a sense, is the door for the other offerings. Just repeat myself. Yeshua said in John 10:9, I am the door. Amen. If anyone comes In through me he will be saved. And he also said, no one can know the Father unless they come through me. So we're beginning to see that he really fulfilled this Olah offering.
Amen.
The priests were in charge of this, and they were the official oversight for the offerings, and they certified the acceptance. So we read in this chapter that the offering had to be accepted, right? And so the priests were those that had the oversight of this. And so I want to take us into the BrideGroom, where we see John the Immerser. And he's the first one to identify Yeshua, right? Who was he though? He was the son of Zechariah. He was known as Yochanan ben Zechariah of the Aaronic priestly line. And so he knew this protocol of the Levitical system, that a priest had to certify the sacrifice as being acceptable. And so what does he say? He says, behold, the Lamb of Elohim that takes away the sins of the world, right? He's certified. This is the one. This is the one we've been looking for. And then we see in Matthew, Elohim, his father, Yeshua's father, also accepts the offering. I'm just getting tingles all over my legs. I'm so excited. He says, this is my son, whom I love, and with whom I am well pleased. Do you think all that was coincidental? I have not. No. I'm glad we're all in agreement. So I want to continue by presenting some imagery, paralleling the Olah offering with Yeshua. Because what is Romans 10:4? Marilyn turned me on to this. I just love it. Romans 10:4 in the complete Jewish Bible, I think it's the only translation that reads it this way. It says that the aim of Torah, the goal at which Torah is shooting for is Messiah. And so that's why we can bring Messiah, the parallel, because he fulfilled all that was written of him. He fulfilled all that was a foreshadow of who he was and what he was supposed to do. He did not do away with the Torah. That is such, talk about the interpreters that we've listened to, particularly in our ears, no more. So, this is why we can bring Yeshua in, because it's the aim of the Torah. It's the perfect one, the holy one, the one that behold the Lamb of Elohim that takes away the sins of the world. Now, if you haven't figured it out, I'm probably going to spend a lot of time on the burnt offering more than the others, because I got so jazzed up about it. And so in verse 2, there's another important step that had to be done in the offering of the sacrifice for it to be accepted. And the one that was to sacrifice this offering, or brought this offering, what did they have to do? They had to lay their hands on the offering. They had to lean their hands on the offering. And it was to be a symbol of really identifying with their sin nature and that transformation of their sin onto this animal, this innocent, right? Innocent animal.
This may be a good segue to actually explain it.
That's what I'm doing. This is called Minka. That's what it is in Hebrew. And this must be done before the sacrifice is accepted. So in accordance with Yeshua, he had to have the same thing done to him, right? And he had to have it done by the elders, the priests, he had to have it done by those, and the people. And so we see examples of this, whether they knew what they were doing or not. But we know there's an account, and I don't have a scripture reference, I think it's Matthew 25. After Judas, has him bought in, and then the priests and the elders are questioning him, and they begin to hit him, right? They lay their hands on his head. And so there's that parallel. He had to have that fulfilled. And so they laid their hands on him. They put a crown of thorns on his head. Right. And so really they were doing this. They were doing this Minka part of this protocol. Shonda, you have something to add? I see you. I see you over there.
Are you sure, Shonda? Pretty good at this.
So, as I was processing all this, it made me think of when someone goes to the altar for salvation, right? We've all experienced that in some way, shape, or form. But often in congregations, they have an altar call. People go up to receive Yeshua as their Savior. But in order to be saved, they, in a sense, are laying their hands on Yeshua, their sacrifice in complete surrender and utter dependence and humility, confessing their sins and making the transfer complete. They're identifying with their sacrifice, with Yeshua, and that's really what happens in that transformation. Okay, do you want to share anything about that?
I do.
Sometimes I talk a lot, and I just give that he can have all the time he wants. Actually, I love that.
I went ahead and put this up because she was actually talking about it, but I'd like to go back. Because it's interesting, in the first chapter, the different regulations are the process, the things that must be done are broken down into three different parts. It's the three parts of which animal you're going to use. They're all burnt offerings, they're all volunteer offerings, and it's like she said, which we'll get down a little bit further, but this is called a nadavah. It's one of the type of free will offerings. And one of the things that when Melissa and I started studying is, I wanted to fully understand is why was this the atonement process of this particular offering. It says, and he will put his hands on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted for him to make atonement for him. And it's just a conversation we had, and I thought, well, if I had it, then I'm going to make a slide of it, because I don't know, it's, to understand all these offerings, there's so many of them, and it's hard to understand which is which. And it's like Melissa said, that it literally means in Hebrew, how do you pronounce that? They shamik yado, which is actually, it says, and he shall lean his hands on it. It's like Melissa said, so you would put both hands. And so to fully understand what this is and how it's done, the first place you see this is the expression of Yom Kippur. And like I said, she actually was beginning to talk about this, so I don't need to go over this again. It's about laying on the hands. And it's the person who's not confessing their sins to a priest or a rabbi. They're actually confessing to the Father and applying it to the goat. That's where we get the term the scapegoat. This is a free will offering. So why would a person bring it for atonement is the question. And so then we'd have to go back to Leviticus 4, which we're going to cover it a little bit more. Maybe we'll wait for this, and then I'll come back to it, because I know what she's going to say. So I think I'm just going to hold off, and we'll come back to this, because it's already a quarter after. We're at the first offering. First offering.
Well, again, this isn't the sin offering. It's to cover the sin nature. And so we know that the sacrifice was bound to the altar, to the mizbeach. And the root word of that word mizbeach on the altar is zabach, which is the meaning to slaughter for a sacrifice. And so Psalms 118 says, it's a psalm of salvation, and in verse 27 it says, bind the sacrifice to the horns of the altar with cords. And so that's what we see happening here. And Yeshua, we know, is the horn of our salvation. Last week on the 8-12-8 prayer call that Ministries of New Life hosts, that was the attribute Karen Yashi, the horn of our salvation. And so when we look at this offering, these offerings, we see more clearly, what does that mean? This Karen Yashi, the horn of our salvation, my salvation. It's what happened. Yeshua was bound on the altar of the execution stake, right? He was bound there with cords and the nails. And so he becomes the horn of our salvation. It's so beautiful. And we'll see later in the Asham, or the guilt offering, that in that particular offering, it's the only offering where the blood was placed on the horns. Everywhere else, the blood is placed around the altar, but on the guilt offering, which we saw in Isaiah 53, the blood is placed on the horns.
It is interesting when you read to see one where they sacrificed the animal, whether it was in front of the tent of meetings or to one side or the other. And then also it's interesting to see what they did with the blood. Some was poured in front, some was placed on the side of the fingers, some was sprinkled on the curtain, and some were placed on the horns itself of the altar.
It was purpose, yeah.
The purpose for it all. I mean, you could really get lost in it.
So I want to take us somewhere. I felt that I was to take us here. So we know the ultimate fulfillment of the Olah offering is Yeshua. In Isaiah 53 it says, "So Adonai has laid on him the iniquity of us all." The blood of the animals cleanse the flesh, but it's only by the blood of Messiah that our conscience is cleansed, that we are renewed, that we are made new, right? And so he really was what is known as the Tamid offering. Tamid means continual, perpetual, always, forever. So Yeshua was the Tamid offering of the Olah offering. He's that continual, perpetual offering, ascending before the throne of Adonai, saying they are not guilty any longer. They are no longer condemned by sin. That smoke, that sweet aroma, Yeshua's death and resurrection, it transcends all time. It says before the foundations of creation, he was crucified. So his death transcends all time. So that still goes up before the Father. Amen. And so that's why we can enter into his Holy of Holies with such a freedom, because he's done it. It's continual. It's perpetual. It's so beautiful. And, yes.
I would just add with that, maybe you're going to come to this, but the Romans 12:1 is, he said, "I beseech you therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto Elohim, which is your reasonable service." Well, what I understand with Galatians 2:20, he's saying what Messiah did, now we also do that, which it is an acknowledgement of what Messiah's done. So I'm to do the same thing, which becomes my worship as a burnt offering.
Yes.
It becomes a burnt offering into worship.
Yes.
And it's actually saying, I died with him, because Galatians 2:20 says that. We know that we were crucified with him, and we live. We don't really live. He lives in us. And so when we do the Romans 12:1 and 2, we're actually giving testament that this is what he did for us. So now we also are burnt offering unto him.
That's good.
That's exactly right. I have somewhere, I'm not sure where my notes, maybe I've already skipped it, but yeah, that we become the offering as well. That's just like they had to bring the offering. Yeah, it's exactly right, Marilyn. I love that. Shirley?
Just 2 Corinthians 2 just says that our lives are Christ-like fragrance rising up to Elohim. That this fragrance is perceived differently by those who are saved and those who are perished.
Wow.
That's right.
That's good.
Wow.
Wow.
And in Hebrews 9:27 through 28. So I want to take us to a place. I want to take a little pit stop here. And I want to talk about the second death. Okay? So Hebrews 9:27 through 28 says, "Just as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this judgment, so also Messiah was offered once to bear the sins of many." Romans 6:23 says, "For the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of Elohim is eternal life in Yeshua Messiah." Revelations verse 6. How fortunate and holy is the one who has a share in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no authority, but they shall be Kohanim of Elohim and the Messiah, and they shall reign with him for 1,000 years.
Amen. There it is.
Revelation 20, verse 14. Then death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Matthew 10:28. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Daniel 12:2. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And finally, Revelation. There's many more. If you want to do a study on the second death, it's awesome. Revelation 2:11. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the ecclesia. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. Why am I sharing all this? James and I, we have such a conviction about this truth, about the second death. And we think to really understand what is being said here, it brings a greater reverence and thanksgiving to Adonai for all that was done on our behalf. Yeshua is a sacrificial lamb. We know this. And I believe, and actually I believe it, and I now confirm it, because the Olah offering, the burnt offering, was done at Passover. So the lamb was an Olah offering. So they could draw near to Adonai as he called them out, right? He called them out by the Passover lamb. Once and for all, we know, so he called them out. And so we know that Yeshua is a Passover lamb, right? But he's also known as the first fruits. He's the first fruits from the dead. But how can that be? Didn't he call Lazarus back to life? How is that? Right. But the second death will come after the judgment for those who are not written in the book of life. And how do we get written? Be consumed. That's what talks about the Passover lamb, what talks about the Olah offering. It had to be completely consumed. Nothing remaining of it. Burned to smithereens. So Yeshua, he went to the second death on our behalf. He went to that place that is stored up, John and the false prophet. He went to that place and took the keys of death on our behalf. That to me is so profound because, yes, the scourging, the cross, it was horrific, but it was a doorway because it's a point that for man wants to die, or all appointed to die. So it was just death on the cross, but it was that he went to that lake of fire, to the second death, and he took the keys from death, and then he resurrected. And now, Galatians 2:20, as we die with him, we resurrect with him to new life, and we will never experience the second death. It's so awesome. It's so profound. I mean, I would love to sit and meditate on that for a long time because it just brings such beauty to a deeper understanding to what he did. It wasn't just the cross. The cross was a doorway to the greater completion. When he said, it is complete, it is finished. That's what he was saying. He knew what was about to happen. I have 5 minutes. So, so I guess I'll just end with this, which is really, no, I need to say more. I have 5 minutes.
It's very important that you get the full understanding. If you can get chapter 1, then the others fall in line. This is where we're spending a lot of time on 1 and 5. Chapter 5 is very important as well.
And so we know that Yeshua is the great high priest. So priest and he's the sacrifice. Isn't that something? And in Hebrews 4 it says, therefore, since we have a great Kohen Gadol, high priest, who has passed through the heavens, Yeshua ben Elohim, let us hold firmly to our confessed allegiance, for we do not have a Kohen Gadol who is unable to sympathize with us, with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all ways and yet without sin, to be that spotless lamb. Therefore, let us draw near to that throne of grace with boldness, that we may receive mercy and find grace in our help of need.
Amen.
I just want to share this one quote from Rabbi Lubavitch, a rabbi. And he found a grammatical oddity in chapter 1, verse 2, which the meaning of it in Hebrew says, when any one of you brings, this is kind of what Marilyn was getting at, so when any one of you brings an offering, is what, how do I want to say this? It's translated in our scriptures as when any one of you brings an offering. However, in the Hebrew, it literally says, when anyone brings an offering of you to Adonai. An offering of you to Adonai. This is exactly what Marilyn was saying, Galatians 2:20. We have to bring an offering of ourselves to Him. We have to identify with the death, burial, and resurrection of Messiah. Now this, of course, is an Orthodox rabbi. He's not one following Yeshua. But this is what he's seeing this. He's getting this. He goes on to say the essence of sacrifice is that we offer ourselves. We bring to Elohim our faculties, our energies, our thoughts and emotions. The physical form of sacrifice, an animal offered on the altar, is only an external manifestation of our inner act. The real sacrifice is Minka, of you. We give God something of ourselves. And this is exactly what Paul was talking about in Romans 12:1. Which Marilyn already referred to. I urge you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of Elohim, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to Elohim, which is your spiritual service.
From the book of Leviticus to write that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He drew from the book of Leviticus. We see many correlations. The offerings point to Yeshua, but also we are represented in the offerings. Now this word Olah has the same root letters in Hebrew as in the word Aliyah, which is what we do when we go up to Jerusalem. And also, as in Yah's command for the children of Israel, to make Aliyah to the promised land. We also, as His spiritual children, are to make a spiritual Aliyah. What is our Aliyah? It is our lives. Our lives offered. Our lives surrendered. Our lives given to Him to serve Him. Our life's journey is our Aliyah. And Yeshua is our ladder of ascension to the Father. Another meaning of that word Olah is stairway or ladder even can be a picture of it. So Yeshua is our ladder of ascension to the Father. He's the Vav that connects heaven to earth. We are forever ascending higher and higher with every right choice we make, right?
Yes.
We can go lower depending on our choices, just like James talked about. choose this day, life or death. So with every choice, we either aliyah, we go higher with the Father, or with every choice we go lower. Or, I think even worse, because Revelation says to be hot or cold, if you're lukewarm, I will spit you out. So even worse is to do nothing. We can't do nothing with this beautiful offering Father has presented for us. We have to go higher. We have to make aliyah. So we will end there. Are we ready for lunch? No? Oh, good. We'll read chapter 2. Did you have anything you want to check?
No. What else could be said?
Oh, wow. Trust me. I would have loved to say that.
All right, so we'll start chapter 2.
I don't know if this is the time to explore this, but you said something on the screen about it makes atonement, but it doesn't do away with the sins. And I had heard, one of the first things I heard about my Jewish fellow students in high school was that they roll it forward, but it never,
Well,
it's like,
Can you the Ola?
Right, where the S continuous offerings.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Ola offering, I guess the way I see it and my understanding and study is, we have a sin nature. And so really, that's even the greater thing that Yeshua did. Our sin nature is now under his blood. And that's why we're no longer slaves to sin, because we are now delivered by him. And so we still have a sin nature, but that's why we choose. We choose, we have to be intentional of choosing to walk out Torah, so that we make the right decisions, that we live a life acceptable and pleasing to Yahweh, to Adonai. And so, we'll see with the sin offering, the guilt offering, it's talking about the unintentional sin, and I don't want to get us open up a can of worms, but in Torah I don't see any atonement for intentional sin, and we could really break that down in many ways, because intentional sin, because we know David really committed intentional. King David, he sinned with Bathsheba and then he killed her husband. But what did he do? He came with such a sincere heart of repentance. And there was great consequences for what he did. And so I see with the Ola offering, it is covering that sin nature. We are now no longer in bondage to sin. That's what the word tells us. And so, because Yeshua was our Ola offering, he took that for us. And so now we don't have choices. And so not to get ahead of ourselves, but the sin offering, guilt offering, now we repent. Now when we do sin, when we recognize it, when we do slander somebody, when we do steal or whatever, those are kind of intentional, but we come before the Father by through the blood of Yeshua and we repent for those things.
Again, I would add Galatians 2:20 to that, because so many people today, they accept Yeshua, and then they're taught, it's just taken care of. But that's not all the teaching. Paul said in Galatians 2:20, I am crucified. We have to come, he said, reckon this. I am crucified with Messiah. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but he lives in me. So he's saying every day I have to enforce that I was with Messiah in his death, and so I died to sin. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to sin. I am going to sin, but I am to live a life that I am forced that I die with him. It isn't that I'm dying. It's the objective truth. I did die with him. And he says, reckon yourselves dead to sin. So if I sin, I've got to repent. But it's not a matter, he just did it all, and I'm just, willy-nilly, I can just live my life now. It's not that at all. It is absolutely enforcing within me that I did die, and I don't have to sin, but if I do, and I'm probably going to sin, but I'm enforcing that I died with him.
Amen.
A lot of people talk about putting myself to death or dying to myself. It isn't, that is not theologically correct.
Correct.
You couldn't die to yourself because you're already dead. You were dead in sin.
That's good.
So he picked you up and put you in Messiah, and he died for sin, so you died, and your sin nature was put away, but now we have to enforce it.
Yeah. Amen.
Because if sin was done away with the first time, it'd be done. We wouldn't need any more sacrifice. Let's move on.
Yeah.
But year to year, day to day, these offerings are given. We repent day to day. Because you got to understand, if we're under this impression that because we repented and therefore we're done with sin, my whole being should reflect that. But it doesn't, because like Marilyn said, the sin nature is in us. And so we're walking this out and trying to live a righteous life, but despite who we are as humans, we sin. We're selfish. It's a whiffum. What's in it for me? And we have to move away from that. But let somebody hit you or get you in the right way, bam, you instantly default to that sin nature.
That's why I agree with what Marilyn said. We have to
Enforce it
enforce.
by telling ourselves, I
That's
died.
it.
I died to this. I don't have to do this.
Yeah.
I repent and I get up and start over. We're going to all make it mistakes. But every time I do it, if I'm doing it with the heart of, and I'm offering myself as a living sacrifice, it should become less and less.
Absolutely. That's the key.
Because I am making an effort that I don't want to sin, and he's going to be right there to warn me. You know, but I'm enforcing his death. I died with him. Now I'm raised with him.
Amen.
In fact, Paul says, I'm with him at the right hand of the Father.
Yes.
And we don't come into agreement with the enemy's whispers and lies and deception. We don't come into agreement with those, because that's often, everything starts with a thought. And so if we decide, no, I'm not coming into agreement with that thought. That's why he says to be renewed in our minds, so that our minds are focused on, set upon who he is, what he's done for us, and that we reckon ourselves, I just agree that we reckon ourselves daily. And so it takes conscious effort, like everything we do in life that's worthwhile, it takes a conscious, intentional effort on our part to
And it's not a matter
it's
of
a warfare.
It's not a matter you feel it. It's a matter that you take the word and say, the Father said you died. So once we take the truth and forget the feelings, the feelings will come, but many people want to go by how they feel. You have to go by what the Word says.
Amen.
That's what wins the battle, is the Word, not your mind reasoning and how you feel.
Yeah.
I had my sister visit recently, and she said, I don't know what I'm supposed to repent of. And I think when I read the scriptures, when I came to the closure of it, I said to my husband, I said, this whole thing with First Leviticus shows me that we're sinners, that we need something. And here we're even supposed to ask for something that we don't even know that we did. And that I said, how am I supposed to ask for repentance for something I didn't even know that I did?
Yeah.
And that takes the seriousness of this, that we are sinners. We have everything to repent about. To have a strong Christian, like my sisters say, I'm sorry if this is on tape, but what am I supposed to repent of? And you know what, after coming to this class, I realized too, repentance is so huge. Because this is all teaching us that we're sinners and he is the only one that's holy. So we've got to, no matter what, whether my husband doesn't want to honor the Sabbath and we argue about all this all the time, I just said, Doug, maybe that's and I have things maybe I don't realize yet, but it's a sin of ignorance. And I'm so sorry, Lord, for just not knowing what you want me to do yet. Amen. Convict me of it. Amen. But totally, we are to be repentant.
We're going to do one more, Steve, and then we're going to break for lunch.
I love the graphic that you put up every now and then about the two hands being laid on the lamb. That one right there. And you said something about, it doesn't, my paraphrase, it doesn't mean just touching the head, it means leaning on it. And how important it is for us to put the full weight of our belief leaning on Him to take our sin and believing that even the sins we don't know about, that He has atoned for and He has covered by His death and sacrifice for us.
Amen.
So you got to lean into it.
That's good.
Amen. That's good.
Amen. Well, we will pick up in chapter 2. Sorry, I got a little long-winded. I have so much more I'd love to share. I just feel like doing this study on this parasha, I feel like it has changed my life. It's been so powerful. And when you get touched so deeply by something, you just wish you could just put everybody in your brain and just have it all expressed, because trying to articulate in words almost doesn't do it justice. When He gives you that deep revelation in your heart and your spirit, you don't even know how to share it. It's so powerful what He's done. So I just encourage you, if you haven't had an opportunity to really study this out, it's profound. It's so profound. It's just it has so many levels. Our Father's Word has so many levels. It's without limit. So we're going to... You have a mic, you okay? I didn't do a lot.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
The parsha for today is also synonymous with Psalms 50.
Mm-hmm.
I just put that on. I just started reading that. My gosh, it's all about that.
I think I actually had that on my slide somewhere, but yeah.
Super.
Yeah, that's right.
Super.
Yeah.
Well, Father, we just want to thank You for what You're doing and how You're doing it, Father. Thank You for this space. Thank You for all the ones who have come to hear Your word on this day. Father, we ask that You just let this meal nourish our body. Bless those who continually bring, Father. It's always more than enough. So we just want to thank You for all that You do in the name of Yeshua. Now, I would like to do one more thing. Today is Jean's birthday, and so we're going to sing Happy Birthday to Jean before we all get up and begin to move. I believe we all know the song in English. One moment, she speaks again.
Tomorrow is Dale's birthday, right?
Yeah! That's right. So we'll just, why don't you guys stand up? Marilyn is hot as well.
Thank you, guys. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Being here with me plays, it requires a whole new setup for our team. So I would like us to thank Ellie and Camille for putting together such a wonderful event.
I want to tell you, I want to thank Taylor. Taylor is amazing. To have somebody like Taylor on this part is absolutely amazing to have. Because it takes an aptitude to just be able to do this. And so, she just thanked Ellie. Yeah, so thank you, Taylor. I appreciate it. It's amazing to have you.
Okay. Well, we are going to start in chapter 2. And so I'm going to ask John if he would read for us chapter 2.
John or John?
John Ryan. If I knew your middle name, I'd throw it in there too. Michael. John Michael Ryan.
Whoa, that's a pretty strong name.
Ooh, he's in trouble.
It follows chapter 1 and comes before chapter 3.
Oh
my goodness. He said he couldn't write.
I'm nervous.
Help him.
She was reading your lips. See, I trained her. I used to do that for her. I can't have to stop there.
Okay. Anyone who brings a grain offering to Adonai is to make his offering of fine flour. He is to pour olive oil on it and put frankincense on it. He is to bring it to the sons of Aaron, the Kohan, and the Kohan is to make a handful of fine flour from it, together with it olive oil and all its frankincense, and to make this remainder portion go up in smoke on the altar as it is an offering made by fire, a fragrant aroma for Adonai. But the rest of the grain offering will belong to Aaron and his sons. This is a especially holy part of the offering for Adonai made by fire. When you bring a grain offering which has been baked in the oven, it is to consist of either unleavened cake made of fine flour mixed with olive oil, or matzah spread with olive oil. If your offering is a grain offering cooked on a griddle, it is to consist of unleavened fine flour mixed with olive oil. You are to break it in pieces and pour olive oil on it. It is a grain offering. If your offering is a grain offering cooked in a pot, it is to consist of fine flour with olive oil. You are to bring the grain offering prepared in any of these ways to Adonai. It is to be presented to the Kohan, and he is to bring it to the altar. And the Kohan is to remove the remainder portion of the grain offering and to make it go up in smoke on the altar as an offering made by fire, a fragrant aroma to Adonai. But the rest of the grain offering is to belong to Aaron and his sons, and an especially holy part. No grain offering you bring to Adonai is to be made with leaven, because you are not to cause any leaven or honey to go up in smoke as an offering made by fire to Adonai. As an offering of first fruits, you are to bring these to Adonai, but they are not to be brought up unto the altar to make a fragrant aroma. You are to season every grain offering of yours with salt. Do not omit from your grain offerings the salt of the covenant with your God, but offer salt with all your offerings. If you bring a grain offering of first fruits to Adonai, you are to bring as the grain offered from the first fruits, kernels of grain from fresh ears, dry roasted with fire. Put olive oil on it and lay frankincense on it. It is a grain offering, and the Kohen is to cause the remainder portion of it, its grit, the olive oil, and all the frankincense, is to go up in a smoke. It is an offering made by fire for Adonai.
Amen. Thanks, John.
I'm on. Okay. Okay, so I want to start by looking at the name of this offering. In many places in our English translations, it's called a grain offering. Some translations, especially the King James, it's a meat offering. Which is interesting. You may have heard it called that. And it actually came from the King James Version, which first appeared in 1611. That's where that meat offering came from, for various reasons, because food then was commonly called meat, and so that's where that kind of came from. But to me, it's even more concerning that this the Hebrew word for this offering is even mistranslated as grain offering. Yes, in this particular instance, it is a grain offering, but the Hebrew word is Minka, which actually means a gift, a tribute, to honor. It's an offering of that kind. And so that's more accurate. I think it actually helps us understand this offering more when we bring it back to the original language, that it's not necessarily a grain offering, but it's a gift offering. Wow, that's so awesome. And so throughout the Tanakh, the word Minka describes not only this particular offering, but also the payment of tribute or honor to a foreign king or someone held in high regard. It is often used to describe a gift offering and other general offerings. So the term tribute offering really is probably the most accurate English translation of this word. I like gift offering, but if you go back to the Strong's, it really hits heavy on tribute offering. And so, because it really has nothing to do, in most cases, not in most cases, but it doesn't entirely have to do with food. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove that to you, so to speak, with some scripture. And really the purpose of this offering is to give honor and praise. And so really for us as believers, this is such a great offering for us to recognize that it's our opportunity to give honor, to give praise, to give adoration, a gift of our worship to Adonai. And really, what's the best way we can do that? Thanksgiving, right, John? Thanksgiving. That is really, I just have determined in my heart, Paul said, be thankful in all things. He's saying, give a Minka offering in all things. He said, whether I lack or whether I have plenty, I give thanks in all things. And so that's really the attitude of the heart that we should take, is to give thanks, to give that offering of praise to Him in all things. And this is interesting, Marilyn. The ministry, I'm not going to go into detail about it, but we're going to take a gift. We felt the Spirit lead us to take a gift to a person in the city who's done a lot for the city in teaching Torah. And we're actually taking him a Minka offering. Amen. We're taking him a tribute offering to say thank you. That's so cool.
Thank you.
So, I want to share some examples of a Minka offering in the scriptures, because nothing interprets scripture better than scripture. So in Genesis 4:4, it says that Yah had respect, go back to the Abel and Cain story, had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Right? This word offering in Hebrew is Minka. It's this offering that we're reading about. If it only meant grain, then it couldn't apply to Abel because he offered the firstlings of his flock, right? And the word for offering regarding Cain is the same word, a Minka offering.
You should say that again.
So regarding Cain and
I think this is
Abel,
important. You guys got to catch this.
the offering that they both brought was this very offering, a Minka offering. Which is interesting. From this scripture, we can know that it wasn't necessarily a grain offering because Abel's offering, which was accepted as a good thing from Adonai, was from the first of his flock, the first fruits of his flock. So those are animals, warm-blooded animals. Warm, right? Yes. Yeah, they are. Yeah, lizards and snakes are cold-blooded. So I just think that's amazing. And here Cain gave a grain Minka offering, yet his wasn't accepted. We could go down that rabbit trail, but we're not going to today. Then we look in Genesis 32:13. It says, so he, being Yaakov, stayed overnight there. And then from all that had come into his possession, he took a present. He took a Minka for Esau. That's what he gave. It literally in Hebrew, that's what it says. He gave a Minka to Esau. And what did he give him? But 200 female goats, 20 billy goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milking camels, and their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. So he obviously didn't give him a grain offering or a grain gift. So this word, this Minka, is a general word for an offering, which can involve grain. So I just think that's pretty awesome to get that clarity on this offering, because we could get stuck in this place of it can only be a grain offering. So in verse 1, it says, and when any will offer, it literally says, when any will offer a gift or tribute offering unto Adonai, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil on it and put frankincense on it. Well, so obviously here Father wants a grain offering as a Minka offering. And he gives us specific ways, to present this. And so, that makes you ask the question, why? I don't have an answer. But I could just create what I think. I think part of it could be because grain was something that was more or less abundant to anybody. Let's look at the story of Ruth. What did Yah command? That they were not to reap the corners or the edges of the field, that they were to leave it for the poor. Yeah. So I've always thought of that, maybe leaving it for their food, but it was also so they could provide this beautiful offering. Actually, not just this offering, because we see in the other offerings that grain was also something that could potentially be given. So isn't that beautiful? Our Father, he's no respecter of man. He wants everybody to participate in worshiping Him, really. It's all about worshiping Him. It's all about presenting ourselves, saying, here I am, and I just want to worship you, Father. So I just love that. Just, wow. So obviously, in this particular situation, it wasn't a flesh offering. There was no blood involved. It wasn't a sacrifice for sin or a substitution of human life. It was simply to thank Him and to honor Him. That's really what it was about. It was offered out of pure love for Adonai. It was a thanksgiving offering to acknowledge, really to acknowledge. And so we can do this in our own lives to just pause and to acknowledge that we owe everything to Him. Our entire existence and our provision, everything that we have is because of Him. And so, Sandy C. asked about the tithe, and we know that actually tithe isn't voluntary, but it is voluntary because we're of free will, but we know there's a blessing in it. But an offering, it says to give your tithe an offering, or release, that's what anyway. So an offering is out of overflow of our heart. It's beyond that 10%. It's the overflow of our thanksgiving to Him. So, something to think about, that the Ola offering, which is the offering we just talked about earlier, and the Minka offering were often paired together. They always seem to accompany one another. And so these two were closely aligned because both were concerned with a person or their nature rather than their behavior or sinful acts. Meaning who they were in relation to Yah was rather than what they had been doing. So they came together really to present that relationship, that drawing near. And it wasn't so much about what they were doing, but just to be in perfect communion with Him. And so we've seen from the scripture that the best grain had to be offered, and it couldn't be offered with leaven, chametz, or honey. Interesting. The priest would take the offering and remove a memorial portion, and that memorial portion then was burned, and the remainder was given to the priest to eat. And it said it was the most holy part. And so I don't have a deep thing to bring out about that. If somebody else does, that's great. But I just think that's interesting that He gave the most holy part to the priest. And so, of course, we can reflect back on Messiah that, He is the high priest. He is also the bread of life, right? And where did He come from? But the house of bread. In Hebrew, it's truly Bet Lachem, which means house of bread. And so, our Father's so amazing. And so, I'm always in a battle up here. I just want to talk, but then I want to stick to my notes, but I know I wrote some really good things down. And
well, we're doing pretty good. You got 35 minutes and you got 3 more. We can do it. 3 out of 5. We got plenty of time.
Let's talk gospel.
What about the salt?
Okay, I'm moving forward.
What about the salt?
Sandy had a question.
Yes.
Salt.
Sandy, you can move up a chair to get that sun out of here.
Oh, I'm
Are
loving
you sure?
it.
You're okay? Okay, continue.
It'll move. It'll move.
He's shining his light on you.
So I do have one thing I'll share and then we'll move on.
I think Sandy has a question.
What?
She has about salt.
The question was about the
Oh, yeah, I'll get there. We'll get there and then
Okay.
we'll move on. Okay. I just always have too much going on. Okay, so he and you know what else is interesting? Let's we'll stay on Yeshua. He's the bread of life, born in the house of bread. And when He was born, or depending on what your theology is, or when He was about 2 years old, the Magi came, the kings came, and what did they present to Him? One of the offerings they presented to Him was frankincense. So that's interesting as well. We see that Mary Magdalene, she anointed Him, and part of the anointing was these incense spices. And so we just see this parallel all throughout it. But I want to get to, how do we will all appreciate this because we've all lived in it. How do we get fine flour? Well, first of all, how do we get flour?
crushing.
We get flour, period, through crushing. Through the trials and tribulations of this life. We're all in the promised land, just like the Israelites. And so through that, as we see, the pattern is the Israelites going through the wilderness. And so we see all the trials and tribulations, but they're to refine us. They're to make us that pleasing sacrifice. And so, yes, flour comes from crushing. And Yeshua, he was crushed to be that bread of life. But how do we get fine flour? You just said it. Sifting, through the sifting. And so even though you've been through a sifting season, it's for his purposes and his glory. It's for your good. And so it never feels good when we're going through it, but it's for your good. And we see in Luke 22.
Sometimes the sifting comes from the crushing. I promise for a fact.
We see in Luke 22, 31 to 32, it says, Yeshua does not, it's a story about with Yeshua talking to Simon Peter. Yeshua does not stop the sifting, but prays for him that his faith does not fail. In regard to Simon Peter, he says, Simon, Simon, indeed Satan has demanded to sift you all like wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith will not fail. That's amazing. We know the story of Job. Job, the same scenario. It's like Satan wanted to sift him. And the Father said, you can, just don't, da-da-da-da. So here we see that he knew he was to be sifted, but he said, I pray for you that your faith will not fail. And so, did you have something, Marilyn? I kind of saw your eyes.
Well, I was just thinking, I'm sure, it's so comforting that he was doing that for us.
Yes, exactly. He will allow many things in these end days to sift us.
Oh, yeah.
That, she's in my pocket.
That's what I mean. It's like she read the notes. Pretty tightly.
To sift us.
Yeah.
Because it is.
That's right.
That we may be the grain offering that he desires. Again, many false teachers will come, that as we cling to his Torah truth and the bread of life of our faith, we will stay strong with thanksgiving always upon our lips. And this is how we stay in thanksgiving. We cling to him, we stay abiding in him, and we stay in his word, his truth. So, one more thing. Oh, see, this is so terrible. Why no leaven? Before we get to the salt, why no leaven?
You could always say, we're in Leviticus 3 and just keep going, because,
Why no leaven? First, I really want to get to the next offering, and the guilt and sin offering, of course, are very important, but the next offering, I feel like is something I really want to share on. So,
Leaven puffs up.
So 1 Corinthians 8:13, 1 through 3 says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he doesn't yet know as he ought to know. But if anyone loves Elohim, he is known by him. Amen. So knowledge puffs up. Yeast causes bread to puff up and to make it look bigger than it really is. Right? And so honey also is a catalyst in causing puffing up. Something I learned, didn't know that. Probably just, anyway. And so this is something that we just need to take home that, again, when it comes to Torah, we can be full of knowledge, but if we're not walking out Torah in a pure heart and applying it to our lives and helping others walk out truth, then we're just puffed up bread that used to go, have you ever had puff-up bread in Turkey? They make, in the country of Turkey, they make this beautiful bread. When they bake it, it puffs up, and it comes to your table hot and steamy, and then suddenly you just tear a little piece of it. It's flat.
It's amazing. It's very my favorite.
That's what happens to us if we're just full of knowledge. Knowledge doesn't, unless it's his knowledge, of course, but Daniel tells us in the end days that knowledge will increase, but I believe that knowledge is his knowledge in us, and that's what we see here today. And so, I got move on. Just quick thought. If you've been prideful, probably 10 times out of 10 you are. Just stop. That's effective for my own life.
I know she just looked at me.
I didn't look at anybody, I looked at the wall. So, Yeshua came low to bring us near to Yah by emptying himself. And so, salt. Let's get to the salt. So, basically what I see with the salt is a couple things. One, yeast, leaven decays, but salt preserves. And another reason for the salt, since the Levitical priests did not have land of their own, Elohim promised to provide for them via the sacrifices of the people, and he called this promise of provision a salt covenant. So I think salt covenant, it's never explicitly explained in the Bible, but we can just put these things together. That one, in Colossians 4:6, it says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each other." And so this really goes back to the first and second commandment, because if we're not careful, we're going to commit Lashon Hara, evil speech, slander, gossip. And so he's telling us you need to add the salt to your offering so you can speak what is gracious and good and loving and kind. And because these people, when they came to offer, they really had to be ritually clean. And if you have your mouth is full of slander, you are beyond ritually clean. So just some thoughts about the salt covenant. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and go to chapter 3. So Yeshua is our unleavened bread. Let's just keep that in mind. So the Passover...
Are you going to 3?
Yeah, we're going to 3. Okay, I'm done.
One of the things that I learned about salt once, that is if two people are making a covenant or an agreement, you want to talk about that? Where they put them together.
Yeah, that's great.
And you can't separate them.
Yeah. When two men, generally it was men that came together, they would make a covenant together. They would use salt. They carried little pouches of salt on their side, and they would both take a pinch out and put it on the table and put it together, showing that this covenant can never be broken because you don't know who salt is who. And now you're one. It's like you're almost become one. And
then they pick it back up and each split it back.
Yeah, and then they pick some up and carry it away with them. So.
Scott, would you mind reading the next? Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, we'll read 3.
3, if you would, please. You've got a strong voice.
If this offering is a peace offering, if he offers it from the cattle, whether male or female, unblemished shall he offer it before Hashem. He shall lean his hand upon the head of his offering and slaughter it at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The sons of Aaron, the Kohanim, shall throw the blood upon the altar all around. From the feast peace offering he shall offer as a offering to Hashem. The fat that covers the on the innards, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is upon them, that is upon the flanks, and he shall remove the diaphragm with the liver and with the kidneys. The sons of Aaron shall cause it to go up in smoke on that altar, besides the elevation offering that is on the wood that is on the fire, a fire offering, a satisfying aroma to Hashem. If his offering to Hashem is a feast peace offering from the flock, blemished shall he offer it. If he offers a sheep as his offering, he shall bring it before Hashem. He shall lean his hand upon the head of his offering and slaughter it before the tent of meeting, and the sons of Aaron shall throw its blood upon the altar all around. From the first peace offering he shall offer a fire offering to Hashem, its choicest part. The entire tail he shall remove it above the kidneys, and the fat that covers the innards, and all the fat that is upon the innards, and the 2 kidneys and the fat that is upon them, that is upon the flanks, and he shall remove the diaphragm with the liver and with the kidneys. The Kohen shall cause it to go up in smoke on the altar. It is the food of the fire for Hashem. If his offering is a goat, he shall bring it before Hashem. He shall lean his hand upon its head and slaughter it before the tent of meeting, and the sons of Aaron shall throw its blood upon the altar all around. He shall bring his offering from it as a firing offering to Hashem, the fat that covers the innards and all the fat that is upon the innards, and the 2 kidneys and the fat that is upon them, that is upon the flanks, and he shall remove the diaphragm with the liver and with the kidneys. The Kohen shall cause them to go up in smoke on the altar, the food for the fire for a satisfying aroma, all the choice parts for Hashem, an eternal decree for your generation in all your dwelling places. You may not consume any fat or any blood. Is that it?
Yeah. Wow. An eternal decree. No fat, no blood. The fat belonged to him, right? It was the offering to Adonai. Oh, are you reading the Chumash?
I was.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I thought it was a good translation.
She's like, I have that. That's good.
I have one, but it's not in this state. Okay, so now we're looking at what is traditionally known as the peace offering. But again, we're going to go back to the Hebrew. Also, it's known as the fellowship offering, just FYI. But the word in Hebrew is shalom. Shalom, which actually means completion. So it is a completion offering, is the actual meaning behind that word. But of course, shalom, the root of that word is shalom. That's where that peace comes from, because the root is shalom. So again, shalom was an offering of fellowship. Scott just read all the details of it, and so of course we don't have time to go into all the details, but what is that instead of the animal being fully burned or going to the priest, the offerer was allowed to eat the offering after it was dedicated to Adonai, thus creating the idea of this fellowship, because it was offered to Adonai and it was given to them, to the offerer to eat. So there was this oneness of fellowship. Again, this word shalom means complete, finished. The Hebrew, I already said all that. And so I want to dig a little bit into this word shalom, which is...
But I do want to add this. It's interesting, like you said, that you get to actually eat this particular offering. The cool thing of it is, or the interesting thing is they can eat it for 2 days.
Yes.
Were you going to get to that?
No, go ahead.
You can eat it for 2 days, but on the 3rd day it must be burned.
Oh boy, that's
which I thought was quite interesting. It's the only offering that they literally get to sacrifice it and take it home, eat on it, and then what's left, it all has to be burned. And we see this. We actually see this in 1 Samuel 20. Saul was actually having one of these dinners, and if you remember, David is missing for those 2 days, and that's what this offering was that Saul was having when David chose not to show up because, well, he wanted to kill him.
Well, that's an interesting tidbit.
In the temple, when they would make an offering in the temple, they would move the outsides of the body, the ashes out, and then keep the innards, the organs and things in, because that created the aroma.
That's correct. It was all surrounded by the fat. The fat belongs to the Lord.
You could even say he cares more about what's on the inside.
That's true.
As the offering to him.
So come on, when we eat, we think when it has a little fat and it's cooked in the fat, how tasty the meat is. So from now on, no fat. Sorry, plain Jane.
I was just going to say, so what you're really telling me is that God was the first one who instigated a barbecue.
That's correct. That's right. That's why it's a sweet aroma. Yeah. I actually came across an article that said that exact same thing about the barbecue. I figured it was from the South, but I didn't want to judge.
What Bob had said, what was left was taken outside the camp. Camp, thank you. And so we know that was the same with Messiah. He was taken outside the camp. But I want to dig into this word shalom. Because shalom doesn't merely mean peace. It means so much more. It means completeness. It means safety, soundness, welfare, health, prosperity. It means peace and quiet, tranquility, contentment. It actually also can mean peace like in friendship, in human relationships, and especially in covenant relationship with Elohim. So the completion offering focus on the completeness of something in the life of the offerer. So I'm going to give just some examples because this offering was given when a request had been granted or when a request was made to Elohim. Also in circumstances on the conclusion of a vow, so we think of like a Nazirite vow, they would have gave a Shalom offering on the conclusion of that vow. And so, for sake of time, I'm just going to go to some examples of scripture. We see a couple different accounts I want to point out where this particular offering is given. So the first one I have is Exodus 24, 4-7, which is obviously before these offerings were given, so that shows us that everything's not exactly in chronological order. It's just the way Moses presented it, which is fine. It's fine, Moses. So Moses wrote down all the words of Adonai, then rose up early in the morning and built an altar below the mountain, along with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He then sent out young men of Bnei Israel who sacrificed burnt offerings, which is the Olah offering, and fellowship offerings, which is the Shalom offering, which is the one we're talking about, of oxen to Adonai. Then Moses took half of the blood and put it in the basins, and the other half he poured out against the altar. He took the scroll of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. Again they said, all that Adonai has spoken, we will do and obey. Amen. So we see here they come into that fellowship with their Maker. And we see that here, we also see that in the next verse I'm going to share, which is Deuteronomy 27:4, which is about 40 years later after this incident, was the day that Israel crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land, and at that time they were instructed to give this offering. So it says, now when you cross over the Jordan, you are to set up these stones about which I am commanding you today on Mount Abel, and coat them with plaster. There also you will build an altar to Adonai your Elohim on an altar of stones. You are not to use an iron tool on them. You are to build the altar of Adonai your Elohim of whole stones, and you are to offer up burnt offerings, Olah offerings, unto Adonai your Elohim. You are to sacrifice fellowship offerings, Shalom offerings, and eat there. And you will rejoice before Adonai your Elohim. You are to write on the stones all the words of this Torah very clearly. You also wonder, am I mistaken, on the Mount of Transfiguration, didn't they eat there together? Or is that, or am I thinking of Mount Sinai when the elders came up and they ate there together? So I wonder, if maybe they made an offering there and ate together. Anyway.
What was the reference again?
The second one, Deuteronomy 27:4-8. So on both of these occasions, there's this idea of wholeness and completion. First, securing Israel's new covenant relationship with Elohim, and second, commemorating the fulfillment of his promise. Both incidences included the Olah offering and the Shalom offering. And often, then we also see the Minka offering because they're really progressive offerings. But between these two occasions, I have an interesting event to share. In Exodus 32. Does anybody know what happened in Exodus 32? I see one nod. Say it, Barb.
The golden calf?
The golden calf. What? Why are we talking about an offering of Adonai with a golden calf account? It says, then they said, this is your God, Israel, which brought saw it, he built an altar before it. Then Aaron made a proclamation saying, tomorrow will be a feast to Adonai. They rose up early the next morning, sacrificed burnt offerings, olah offerings, and brought fellowship offerings, shalom offerings. This offering and drink and rose up to make merry. Wow, that's amazing. In the Hebrew, it's exactly this offering, these two offerings, but I'm hitting on this one specifically, that they offered to this golden calf, a pagan creation. Idol. Oh, I got it.
It's a quarter, we got 15 minutes.
Oh. So I just want to get here. Okay. Have you ever taken note, this is a question, have you ever taken note of the first thing Yeshua said to his disciples in John 20, verses 19 through 21? I'm just putting that out there. I don't expect you to know the answer. Let's read. It says, it was evening on that day. I could cry. The first of the week, when the doors were locked where the disciples were for fear of the Judean leaders, Yeshua came and stood in their midst, and he said to them, Shalom Aleichem! After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw their Lord. Yeshua said to them again, Shalom Aleichem! When was this? After his resurrection. It was the only time recorded that he said this. And what do we know about Shalom from Isaiah 53? It says the punishment for our Shalom was upon him.
Oh, wow.
Say that again.
The punishment for our Shalom was upon him. So true Shalom can only come after atonement is made.
Right, that's good.
That's when true Shalom comes, after atonement is made. So again, Shalom is so much more than just peace. Although peace is so beautiful, he is the Prince of Peace, the Prince of Shalom. But again, Shalom means all those things I mentioned earlier: safety, rest, prosperity, wholeness, welfare, completion, fullness, soundness. Shalom means wholeness, soundness. This word shalem is actually what they call a whole chicken in Israel. It means whole, complete. And so that's what he was saying. In essence, he was speaking a blessing, a pure shalom over his disciples when he said, Shalom Aleichem to them. He's saying, now that I'm risen and full of life and you are risen with me, now perfect shalom is yours. What a gift.
Wow, that's good.
That's just so beautiful. And so Ephesians 2,
This is chapter 4.
3. Therefore, keep in mind that once you, Gentiles in the flesh, were called, well, this is my Edie fix, were called uncircumcision by those called circumcision. At that time, you were separated from Messiah, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without Elohim in the world. But now, in Messiah Yeshua, you who were once far off, that's everybody in the room that I know of, unless you are Jewish, have no hope with Elohim in the world. But now, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of the Messiah, for he is our Shalom. The one who made the two into one and broke down that middle wall of separation. Within his flesh, he made powerless the hostility, the law code of mitzvot contained in regulations. He did this in order to create within himself one new man from the two groups, making shalom, to reconcile both to Elohim in one body through the cross, by which he put the hostility to death. Wow. And Paul said this, right? He was a Pharisee Jew, right? So he had in mind this offering when he said this. He knew what it meant. He knew what this pure shalom, completionist, wholeness really meant. And he said, it's yours now. It's yours, my Israelite family, and it's yours, the nations, that belongs to you as you come into him. Okay, chapter 4.
What chapter was that in?
We'll go to chapter 4.
We made it. Chapter 4.
Maybe we could just read chapter 4 and 5 together for sake of time. Because there's a lot of parallels in chapter 4 and 5.
Steve, do you have that, Steve? I know you got a loud voice.
I do.
Would you mind reading 4 and 5? Since they're
4 and 5, just
would you mind?
read through.
Okay.
Okay. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, If a person sins unintentionally in any one of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and commits any of them, if the anointed priest sins so as to bring guilt on the people, then let him offer to the Lord a bull without defect as a sin offering for the sin he has committed. He shall bring the bull to the doorway of the tent of meeting before the Lord, and he shall lay his hand on the head of the bull and slay the bull before the Lord. Then the anointed priest is to take some of the blood of the bull and bring it to the tent of meeting. And the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil of the sanctuary. The priest shall also put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense, which is before the Lord in the tent of meeting. And all the blood of the bull he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the doorway of the tent of meeting. He shall remove it. He shall remove from it all the fat of the bull as a sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat which is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys, just as it is removed from the ox of the sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest is to offer them up in smoke on the altar of burnt offering. But the hide of the bull, and all its flesh with its head and its legs and its entrails and its refuse, that is, all the rest of the bull, he is to bring out to a clean place outside the camp where the ashes are poured out, and burn it on wood with fire. Where the ashes are poured out, it shall be burned. If the whole congregation of Israel commits error, and the matter escapes the notice of the assembly, and they commit any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and they become guilty, when the sin which they have committed becomes known, then the assembly shall offer a bull of the herd for a sin offering, and bring it before the tent of meeting. Then the elders of the congregation shall lay their hands on the head of the bull before the Lord, and the bull shall be before the Lord. Then the anointed priest is to bring some of the blood of the bull to the tent of meeting, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil. He shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar, which is before the Lord in the tent of meeting, and all the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the doorway of the tent of meeting. He shall remove and offer it up in smoke on the altar. He shall also do with the bull just as he did with the bull of the sin offering. Thus he shall do with it. So the priest shall make atonement for them, and they will be forgiven. Then he is to bring out the bull to a place outside the camp and burn it as he burned the first bull. It is the sin offering for the assembly. When a leader sins and unintentionally does any one of the things which the Lord his God has commanded not to be done, and he becomes guilty, if his sin which he has committed is made known to him, he shall bring for his offering a goat, a male without defect. He shall lay his hand on the head of the male goat and slay it in the place where they slay the burnt offering before the Lord. It is a sin offering. Then the priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering. All its fat he shall offer up in smoke on the altar, as in the case of the fat of the sacrifice of peace offerings. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him in regard to his sin, and he will be forgiven. Now if any one of the common people sins unintentionally in doing any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and becomes guilty, if his sin which he has committed is made known to him, then he shall bring for his offering a goat, a female without defect, for his sin which he has committed. He shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and slay the sin offering at the place of the burnt offering. The priest shall take some of its blood with his finger, and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. And all the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. Then he shall remove all its fat, just as the fat is removed from the sacrifice of peace offerings, and the priest shall offer it up in smoke on the altar for a soothing aroma to the Lord. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him, and he will be forgiven. But if he brings a lamb as his offering for a sin offering, he shall bring it, a female without defect. He shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and slay it for a sin offering, in the place where they slay the burnt offering. The priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. And all the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. Then he shall remove all its fat, just as the fat of the lamb is removed from the sacrifice of the peace offerings, and the priest shall offer them up in smoke on the altar, on the offerings by fire to the Lord. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him in regard to his sin which he has committed, and he will be forgiven. Now if a person sins after he hears a public adjuration to testify when he is a witness, whether he has seen or otherwise known, if he does not tell it, then he will bear his guilt. Or if a person touches any unclean thing, whether a carcass of an unclean beast, or the carcass of unclean cattle, or a carcass of unclean swarming things, though it is hidden from him, and he is unclean, then he will be guilty. Or if he touches human uncleanness, of whatever sort his uncleanness may be, with which he becomes unclean, and it is hidden from him, and then he comes to know it, he will be guilty. Or if a person swears thoughtlessly with his lips to do evil or to do good, in whatever manner a man may speak thoughtlessly with an oath, and it is hidden from him, and then he comes to know it, he will be guilty in one of these. So it shall be when he becomes guilty in one of these, that he shall confess that in which he has sinned. He shall also bring his guilt offering to the Lord for his sin which he has committed, a female from the flock, a lamb or a goat as a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement on his behalf for his sin. But if he cannot afford a lamb, then he shall bring to the Lord his guilt offering for that in which he has sinned, 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. He shall bring them to the priest, who shall offer first that which is for the sin offering. He shall nip its head at the front of its neck, but he shall not sever it. He shall also sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar, while the rest of the blood shall be drained out at the base of the altar. It is a sin offering. The second he shall then prepare as a burnt offering, according to the ordinance. So the priest shall make atonement on his behalf for his sin which he has committed, and it will be forgiven him. But if his means are insufficient for 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, then for his offerings for that which he has sinned, he shall bring the 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a sin offering. He shall not put oil on it or place incense on it, for it is a sin offering. He shall bring it to the priest, and the priest shall take his handful of it as its memorial portion, and offer it up in smoke on the altar with the offerings of the Lord by fire. It is a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him concerning his sin, which he has committed from one of these, and it will be forgiven him. Then the rest shall become the priest's, like the grain offering. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, if a person acts unfaithfully and sins unintentionally against the Lord's holy things, then he shall bring his guilt offering to the Lord, a ram without defect from the flock, according to your valuation in silver shekels, in terms of the shekel of the sanctuary, for a guilt offering. He shall make restitution for that which he has sinned against the holy thing, and shall add to it a fifth part of it, and give it to the priest. The priest shall then make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering, and it will be forgiven him. Now if a person sins and does any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, though he was unaware, still he is guilty, and shall bear his punishment. He is then to bring to the priest a ram without defect from the flock, according to your valuation for a guilt offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him concerning his error in which he sinned unintentionally and did not know it, and it will be forgiven him. It is a guilt offering. He was certainly guilty before the Lord.
Amen. I just want to say something. Thank you, Steve. I know reading sometimes takes some time, but you got to understand, it's the reading of the Word that brings revelation. We can talk about it all we want, but it's the reading of the Word and the Spirit that's in it that brings revelation. This is why we read all of it out loud. So I just wanted to say that.
That's good. Amen.
Thank you.
Well, I
Thanks,
really apologize that we're so short on time.
I don't know how that's possible.
5 offerings are hard to cover. But I just want to point out quickly, the sin offering, this word in Hebrew is katah. And katah actually literally means missing the mark. Marilyn hits on this quite often. It means missing, and she could probably do a far better job of sharing about this. It's more than just sinful deeds. It's missing the mark. Well, what's the mark? The mark is the Torah. The Torah keeps us in alignment with the Father. So when we do all that He's commanded us to do, then we're less likely to miss the mark, to be in that place of sin. You know, Yeshua could only be the perfect sacrifice for sin, for guilt, for all of it, is because He kept Torah perfectly. He kept it perfectly. So that's how He was accounted as without sin, without blemish, because He kept the Torah perfectly. And so just to take from this is that we miss the mark literally by just not keeping our Father's commandments. And that's what this is talking about. Unintentionally, nonetheless, it's not holding His commandments as something very highly to be esteemed, which really is a lack of reverence of Adonai. When we don't keep His commandments, it's really saying, I don't really believe you're who you say you are. I don't really honor you, because there's no gray area in this. His commandments, His word is the same yesterday, today, and forever. There's no shadow of changing in Him. So when we don't reverence His ways, then we say we don't really love you. So that's sin, you know, and so we want to be those who are intentional about keeping our Father's commandments. And I just want to say in this, you know, we see these different levels of offerings, whether you're the high priest and on down. And, you know, it just makes you think, it talks about leaders are called to a higher accountability because they're leading the flock. And so when they sin, the guilt actually hits the whole flock. And so that's what the high priest, but so they had to offer something of great value. Well, it's the same thing with us. What we offer to Him should cost us nothing. We can't be willy-nilly about how we come before the Father and how we serve Him. You know, He expects that it would cost us something. And I just wonder if people of today got more that way, you know, like James said, if they realized they had to take one of the highest valued animals from their flock to sacrifice, would they be so, you know, complacent in their walk before Adonai?
I'll break it down into guys' terms. You bought a brand new Porsche.
Yeah.
You sin, you take your Porsche to the dealership, he takes it out in the parking lot and burns it. Okay, continue.
So I just want to bring up one story from the Bible. When King David David sought to obtain a threshing floor on a portion of land from a commoner for the purpose of presenting sacrifices, he was given the option of taking it for free. But what was David's response? He said, "No, I will surely buy it from you for a price, nor will I offer burnt offerings to Adonai my Elohim with that which costs me nothing." So it's right there, and it's for us to grab hold of. And I love the story of the widow's mite, you know, the story where the widow, all these rich people are coming to the temple, and they're just pouring their riches in, and like, look at me. And then there's this little widow. She has nothing. She's barely surviving. And Yeshua's witnessing this. And she comes up and she drops in 2 little mites, which was really probably less than a penny in our day. Well, probably a penny in our day. 2 minutes. So it cost her everything. And so that's what Father wants from us. So with that,
I'll put up slide 5, just so you can see the final. The final slide.
Go ahead.
It's up.
It's up. So really our offering should cost us something. That's the bottom line.
The key word I want you to think about is there. It's so deep. Very deep. I forgot to put the sentence there.
And then the guilt offering is a Shalom offering. That's the next one, which we can't go into all this, so. Okay, thank you. We're going to actually take some time now to pray. Was there anybody that had a final, I don't want to just leave everybody up. Final thought, comment as we've speed skated through this?
I was fascinated, and I should have said this long ago. In the first chapter, 3 times it says, in order, in order, in order. And I don't know if you touched that and I was somewhere else, but I think that must be a very important thing to search out too.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So